Good morning, and welcome to the ninth meeting of the year of the California Commission on the State of Hate. I'm Russell Roybal, Chair of the Commission, and I call this meeting to order on Monday, December 9th at 2024 at 9:01 a.m. Closed captioning is available for this meeting. The closed captions can be displayed in English or another language, which will allow you to view an automated live transcript of the meeting in another language. To display closed captions on your screen, please do the following. Click the button labeled Show Captions at the bottom of your Zoom window. Select the box at the bottom of the window labeled Enable Translation. When you see you've enabled translation at the top, select English as the speaking language and select your preferred language in the second menu. And then click Save. Automated captions in your selected languages start appearing at the bottom of the Zoom window. We will send instructions in Spanish in the chat. Now to establish a quorum for our meeting today, we'll call the roll. Deputy Director Watts.
Chair Roybal.
Present.
Vice Chair Salcedo.
Present.
Commissioner Shea.
Present.
Commissioner Quillar. Commissioner Damsky.
Present.
Commissioner Filer.
Present.
Commissioner Levin.
Present.
Commissioner Suthers.
Present.
Great, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to review the agenda. We have a very packed agenda today for the commission, so I'm going to be trying to keep us moving as we get through all of our agenda items. We will be having an informational presentation from Assemblymember Chris Ward. We will also have some informal presentations on restorative justice today, including from our former commission colleague, Professor Shireen Sanar. We will approve the minutes of our last meeting. We'll hear a report from the California Civil Rights Department. We will screen and view the post law enforcement training, which we have discussed in the commission before, and have a conversation about that. We'll, of course, do our chair and subcommittee reports and updates. And then we have a couple of proposals to review. One is our meeting schedule for next year. And then also some action around elections of the chair and the vice chair and some changes to our policy. And then we'll do commission member announcements, public comment on items not on the agenda, and then we will be done. So as you can hear and see, if you have the agenda, it is a big meeting today. So excited to be with all of you. And I want to extend my thanks. I was ill at our last meeting. I was not able to be here. So I want to extend my thanks to Vice Chair Salcedo for stepping in and running the meeting, facilitating the meeting in my absence. Thank you very much, Vice Chair Salcedo. I'm sure it was a nice change from my normal facilitation, as you are much more effervescent than I, Commissioner Salcedo.
I'm sorry.
I said you're a much more effervescent than I am as a facilitator. I'm sure it was a nice change.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It was my honor to step in on your behalf. Thank you.
So you can review the agenda by visiting the commission's website or clicking on the button labeled Meetings and Agendas. The link is in the chat as well. I'd also like to review our process for public comment. If you are joining us on Zoom and would like to make a public comment, please use the raised hand feature to join the public comment queue. If you are joining us by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute. You may also submit a written public comment by email to csh@calcivilrights.ca.gov. If you submit a written comment that pertains to an agenda item, we will read it aloud or summarize it when the public comment portion of that agenda item is open and before any vote. If the comment is not about a specific agenda item, we will read it aloud or summarize it during the agenda item titled Public Comment on Items Not on the Agenda. For anyone joining us in the room at the California Civil Rights Department office in Los Angeles, please raise your hand for a verbal comment and we will unmute the room. You may also submit a written comment by writing your comment on a piece of paper and handing it to Shanna Hart, our staff member in the room today. Thank you, Shanna, for being there. In the interest of time, we will limit verbal public comments to 2 minutes per person. Now, let's move on to our first informational presentation on the California State Legislature. I would like to introduce hand it over to Commissioner Damsky to introduce our guest, Assemblymember Ward. Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. Assemblymember Chris Ward, who was first elected in 2020, serves the 78th Assembly District representing San Diego, which includes the LGBTQ+ cultural district of Hillcrest. Assemblymember Ward currently serves as the chair of the Assembly Housing and Community Development Committee, chair of the California Legislative LGBTQ Caucus, and chair of the Select Committee on Biotechnology. He focuses his legislative efforts on housing, homelessness, environment and clean energy, and civil rights and community protections, while balancing other key priorities concerning constituents. Additionally, Assemblymember Ward was the lead author on the life-saving, first in the nation, Assembly Bill 1955 Safety Act, which addressed the issue of school districts forcibly outing LGBTQ+ students. I personally appreciate Assemblymember Ward's commitment to addressing hate as experienced by many communities, and I'm grateful for his friendship and allyship. He asked to have the opportunity to address our commission, and I am pleased that we were able to schedule our meeting to accommodate him today. Welcome, Assemblymember Ward.
Thank you, Commissioner Damsky. It's great to see you. I know you're not too far away, but it's good to see everybody online. Thank you to all commissioners for the opportunity to join you here this morning as well. I appreciate everything that you've been doing. You really are the trailblazers for the work that needs to be done to be able to understand and be able to find common sense solutions that are going to help us tamp down hate acts across all of our communities in California. And as you heard, as the chair of the LGBT caucus and a member of the Jewish caucus, it's incredibly important for me to make sure that we're doing our part in the legislature to be able to support these recommendations and be able to support ultimately our community as they are seeing increases in threats. You heard one of the bills, but I did have a few that I wanted to really highlight as far as some of our areas that we were able to get to the governor's desk. In September, if I got my months right, he was able to sign AB 3024, which is the Stop Hate Littering Act. We know from the Anti-Defamation League's data that last year we saw a 38% rise in hate-motivated propaganda efforts, including a new phenomenon called hate littering. And it's in the form of racist or anti-Semitic or anti-LGBTQ flyers that are placed directly on a victim's property with the intent to make them fear for their safety. Now, this has become a very, I would characterize a preferred tactic by some hate groups because until recently it was allowed, it kind of existed in the legal gray area. It allowed them to be effective, have an increased personal impact, but really made it hard for law enforcement to prosecute because it was difficult. It wasn't defined well, and it was difficult to figure out how our statutes in the code could be able to counteract some of these activities. So as a state, we recognize that these materials, they're not just pieces of paper, they're not just expressions of free speech, but they're direct threats placed on personal property of targeted community members and their neighbors with the intention to be able to harass, intimidate, and dehumanize them. And so working with some of my local council members and city attorney, and our attorney general, we were able to think about AB 3024, which made improvements to an existing Ralph Civil Rights Act from 1976. That act ensures that victims are going to be provided adequate protections against hate littering, and now we create new legal tools to hold some of the offenders accountable. We know that hate acts have no place in our communities, and so this is just one of the examples about how we're trying to think together and creatively about doing everything in our power to ensure that Californians are free from hate-related violence in all of its forms. Another bill that was proud to author helps victims of doxing. So I think doxing is the act which it's a harassment tactic when a person is releasing another individual's private, personally identifying information without their consent, and it's got the intent to be able to cause that person harm. And this is especially exploded with the advent of social media and online platforms. So I had AB 1979, the Doxing Victims Recourse Act, to provide relief and support for any victims to allow them to be able to pursue civil restitution for the harms they endured as a result of being doxxed. We know that individuals targeted in our, not just LGBTQ individuals, but others that are targeted in our community see disproportionate increases in the acts of doxing. And doxing is actually already a crime under the penal code, a lot higher of a bar to be able to prosecute. But absent that, there was actually no protections for the victims in the civil code. So that's what we had with AB 1979, is again to help hopefully another deterrence from these actions happening in the first place. But where they do happen, given the victims the opportunity to be able to made whole via restitution and get their lives back on track. And then Commissioner Adamski had mentioned AB 1955, the Safety Act, which was a significant effort. Yes, first in the nation, and I'm glad it's attracted interest from other state legislatures as well. But this really comes out of a growing spate of national attack on LGBTQ people, particularly through policies that are requiring teachers to out students, to notify others if a child is identifying as transgender or being approved. And we're seeing that sort of blanket direction, sadly, taking place in state legislatures across the country to force these outings. But also we saw a spate of individual school districts across California decide to take it on their own and really try to create and reflect some of these policies in their own local policy making. So we thought really critically with a lot of our community partners. We took a little bit of time to make sure that we were testing some of the issues, and we were thinking through, the development of legislation that would be able to really keep all of our students safe and be able to exercise best practices for this community. We know that forced outing policies will harm everyone, parents, family, and school staff, because of this unnecessary compelling of them to involve themselves in what should be family matters, and removing the opportunities for families to even build trust or have conversations on their own terms. Now, we know that a lot of youth have supportive families, but some continue to face rejection and are exposed to a lot of harm if they are prematurely forced to be able to reveal their identity. At the same time, we know that young people are going to be able to thrive in school when they have the trust and support of teachers. And honestly, teachers just want to teach. They don't want to be the gender police. They don't want to be subject to a lot of these directives that some of these more targeted school board members have been incurring upon them. So because I think a lot of this background, and because we know and have worked so closely with a lot of students that are going through a very sensitive and very difficult time period in their life, we thought that it would be best policy to make sure that all California students were treated equally, and also reducing some of the harm that we're seeing at some of these school board meetings. We know one of the early instigators of this was members of the Chino Valley Unified School District. And we saw that when they passed their forced outing policy a little more than a year ago at this time, that 1,500 calls were received solely from those who identified as residents of Chino Valley. And the mental health impacts that are experienced by some of the residents are amongst the countless Californians who are heavily and negatively impacted by some of these policies. So what did we need to be able to do about that? First, the bill, AB 1955, did 4 things. All right, I've got a little one here too who's homesick with me this morning. So sorry with your if you just give me a second here. I know.
No worries. Take care
Yes.
of family, of course.
Thank you. Let me get him situated. If you give me a 30-second delay, I'll be right back for you.
Sure.
All right,
Take
thanks, guys.
the time you
Appreciate it.
need. Commissioner
Commis-
Filer, did you have a
Yeah,
comment?
yeah, Commissioner Damsky, can you, I don't mean to be naive, can you explain to me in the, I think he said the Chino Valley, the outing that was happening, what was going on?
I'm not familiar with what was going on in Chino Valley.
Okay. So just for my naiveness, and I'm sorry to say this, is this, our school systems or school boards beyond just allowing parents to know? They're saying whole communities need to be out, kids need to be outed to the whole community? Is that, sorry, Assemblymember Ward, I was just asking in Chino Valley if I could
Yep.
understand exactly what was happening. So it was beyond just parents knowing about what was going on to their with their children, this was a need to out it to the whole community?
No, it was
It's-
it was to be able to require within 72 hours that a school official must report out the information that they heard to the parents. And so
Uh-huh.
again, that's not again, this is sadly we all have different I think situations at home. And as I
Yeah,
mentioned,
yeah.
a lot of supportive environments, but not all. And it can do more harm than good by requiring this. And it puts teachers in a really weird
awkward
position.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
And
thank
so,
you.
right. So thank you for the question. And also this is why we have passwords on TV, right? So we're
Yeah.
trying to like monitor the content that our kids are watching.
Right.
So I would say that the bill intended to be able to do four things. One, make sure that we were directing that if any local policy was passed, that it was invalidated. By definition, that was the harm that we were trying to correct there. Secondly, it affirmed that teachers and employees should not be discriminating based on sexual orientation or gender identity, and should not be compelled to disclose any information that they are hearing. Third, with a caveat, and I'll get to that. Third, it protects teachers from facing retaliation for simply doing their job. So what happens if a board really believed, and we're seeing, some cities in California that believe that they should supersede state law. So we wanted to make explicitly clear that there was anti-retaliatory protections built into our state code to be able to help them should an incident of conflict ever arrive. But importantly, not just, sort of trying to push back, but actually also thinking about ways that we can improve the situation. The Safety Act helps provide a lot of parents, guardians, and families of LGBTQ students with critical resources in order to help them support them in working towards acceptance on their own terms. So yes, trying to lay down the law about what we do and we don't do in these situations, but also be able to make sure that the state is doing its part to provide local districts with resources about how to have these very difficult conversations. Some may be having these for the first time. The bill does not limit any student's ability to be able to discuss their identities with their own families in any manner they choose. We heard that somehow we were trying to be able to drive a wedge, and that is absolutely not true. It strengthens existing protections and supports families, and we are going to be able to ensure that all students are safe or supported and not isolated due to any part of their identity, and ensures that families are supported so they can have personal conversations and work towards acceptance on their own terms. So again, that is currently under lawsuit, I'm aware. I know that there's going to be some activity and motions in courts. So we believe, again, why we took the time to be able to develop this the right way, that we thought through these potential challenges that are indeed coming at this law. But we believe that they will hold firm as the judicial process sort of works itself through. And the caveat that I wanted to mention too is that, of course, we do care very much about the mental health and well-being of our students. And so nothing precludes a teacher, this is another important caveat, from having these conversations with a parent when you feel like you need to bring individuals in or really broaden, the scope of, what might be going on in an individual's life. If you see a decline in academic performance or, there's an increase in bullying or other activities, of course you can share relevant information. So the bill does not preclude these conversations from happening. They just prohibit the requirement that they happen because, again, not all situations are made alike. And then, so that's little bit on the Safety Act. And then I also would be remiss if I didn't mention the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. As a member of the Jewish Caucus, very happy to continue to elevate that as a priority issue for us to be able to support local organizations and the work that they're doing to keep their constituencies and their communities safe. As of last Monday, I took over as chairman of the LGBTQ caucus. We've got a lot on our plate, especially with the national headwinds that we see coming at us right now. I think some of you may know this has been a caucus of pride, and I mean that with a capital P. We have now been around for about 22 years. We were formed in 2002 to create the state's first LGBTQ legislative caucus. And we have goals, of course, of furthering equality, equity, and justice. We're now one of the largest caucuses in the nation. Last year, we were proud to break a barrier with 12 members, and that sort of reflected about 10% of the legislative body, which is in parity with about 10% of the general population who identify. But we had some luck this cycle. We now stand at 14 members strong, even with losing 3 members due to term limits and other races. We picked up 5, so we netted 2, and so we're a growing body, and we're going to need all hands on deck. We know that there's a national wave of hate and attacks against our community, especially targeting our TGI community members. We've always stood strong in our conviction to be able to support all members of our community, and we've showed perseverance in the face of adversity and hate. We have individuals that we're working with across various works and initiatives. We've grown not just in numbers, but also in impact as a caucus. Last legislative session, we had our first caucus scholarship in coordination with the LGBTQ Foundation, and we're able to support a number of students across California in their academic pursuits. In addition, we created and really formalized our California LGBTQ Unity Council, which basically serves as an advisory body to our caucus. So reaching out and trying to make sure that all perspectives, or at least a really good representation of the breadth of our community across nearly 20 organizations, was able to engage with our caucus staff and our leadership directly. That, I think, proactive and ongoing feedback loop is going to be able to help us make sure that we are, one, not losing touch with what's going on the ground, because you can let time fly by when you're stuck at the state capitol for an extended period, and you want to make sure that you got your ear to the ground, that you're being responsive to any emerging threats or issues that are coming at us, and how do we respond, and how do we take that into action that the caucus can support and be able to sort of show very, very regular and ongoing support for our community. I mentioned, we know that, some voices, even sadly within our own community, they're trying to drive a wedge. We saw this in the recent election conversation, a wedge between LGBT individuals and the TGI community. But our caucus continues, and the advisory council continues to reaffirm that we are united and we do support the entire breadth of our community and the work that we're doing. We also had a new effort last cycle to be able to launch what we called a series of rural tours. We know that we are everywhere in California, and many people in their home communities often don't see leaders like us, because if we're not at the state capitol, we're back in our home districts. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting out to more rural communities in California where they might feel overlooked or underrepresented. We know that state funding sometimes can be able to be driven towards larger districts or areas that LGBT individuals are largely concentrated, but we shouldn't leave anybody behind, and we have to do that proactive work to make sure that we're hearing the special nature of maybe what more rural LGBT Californians are facing, but also that they have an active link to voices at the Capitol, even when their own legislators may not necessarily support them with their work. So to that end, we were able to visit Nevada City, Riverside, Solvang, Fresno, and also saw 4 tribal nations and strengthening our relationships there, as well as had some activity out in the Coachella Valley and up in the Salinas Valley last fall. So I hope that gives you a sense for some of the various initiatives that we're working on. We are thinking about, of course, the strong work that we need to do this year through legislation and budget support. Everyone's asking, especially has been around my own assembly district down in San Diego, what's going on with the state budget, and we'll formally find out in about a month's time in early January. But monitoring closely what we're seeing with the Department of Finance, I can tell you that we're not anywhere near as dire a situation as we were this time last year, when we knew that there were a lot of threatening cuts on the line, and indeed we had to really be targeted and frugal about our budget decisions. It was not pretty, but we think that this year, we're not going to see a significant amount of growth, but we're not going to be able to, I think, see any threats to some of the core social services and safety net programs that Californians truly depend on. As we budgeted pretty accurately the revenues that we expected to have with this year's budget, so we might be able to have kind of a hold the line year. That said, we try to find support where we can as a caucus. Last year, we were able to support fertility treatment, including IVF, not always available or within one's means, I guess, to be able to support LGBTQ individuals choosing fertility treatment to be able to have a family. We know that we need to do a better job with sexual orientation and gender identity, or SOGI, data collection, so that if you don't have the data, you can't adequately say where there are those gaps in health equity. And we know that just starting within our own house and working with Department of Health and Human Services and other agencies, making sure that laws that were already put into place are implemented correctly so that we have that data so we can make responsible decisions. That's been an area of caucus work, is to have the funding so that they'd be able to adequately be able to collect that data and analyze it for our benefit. Supporting higher education equity, a lot of our California community colleges and universities being able to support health coverage for preventative care without burdensome cost sharing, and be able to support foster youth to make sure that they're growing into some of their best financial safety nets as they are transitioning into adulthood. So that's a kind of a scope of some of the things that we work on the fiscal side. We did some work last year, again, despite all the headwinds, to be able to support the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, to be able to support behavioral health and mental health needs through and rescuing a lot of resources for youth health equity. And then being able to support a lot of our LGBTQ historical archives and their work, because again, we know that we've had some dark chapters and a lot of righteous fights and a lot of things to overcome in our history, and we want to make sure that's well documented so that that history is not forgotten as future generations continue to be able to build upon some of this progress. So I think that's a really good overview and scope of kind of the caucus itself and some of the things that it's working on. I think Commissioner Damsky had asked me to, spend maybe some of my closing thoughts and some of this time, talking about our ongoing interaction and making sure that the legislature is working hand in hand with this commission. We know that we need to coordinate all of our efforts to combat hate in California. We know that these public hearings, such as the one on today, are really beneficial. They improve our direct relationships between legislators and a lot of the commissioners' work. And our caucus also has full-time dedicated staff to help with some of the day-to-day activities of our caucus. And so, we'd love to be on every meeting as possible, but we want to make sure that we're having a active, and again, just like our own advisory caucuses, I would consider you much in the same role, that we have ongoing relationships about the recommendations and outcomes that you're that you're wanting us to work on, because we can pivot a lot quicker then and be able to implement some of the things that you're seeing as the work that needs to be done. That you always have a door open to my office, and I'm sure I speak for all other caucus members as well. And when I'm not personally there, our chiefs of staff or our legislative directors are also always available to be able to take some of this input and be able to sort of work through any problem issue that's coming up in the moment and is urgent and needs to be addressed, or ongoing budget requests or legislative activity that we can be able to design on your behalf and be able to support the work that we need to do to strengthen our laws and ultimately reduce hate and help California communities. So I think with that, I'd love to turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, and hear about any questions the commissions have. But again, I will come full circle and just thank you again for your volunteer activities with this commission. I know this is representative of a lot of communities across California and geographic places across California that are coming together to make sure that we are turning these horrible trend lines around, and that we are recognizing the roots of where hate acts are occurring, and make sure that we are responding appropriately to reduce the incident of hate across our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Ward. Thank you for your service. Congratulations on being elected chair of the caucus. Very exciting, not only because the caucus is such an important organization, but because you are my assembly member as a proud resident of North Park in San Diego. So thank you again for being here today and for joining us and for all the information you shared. I see we have a number of questions from commissioners, so we will do that and then we'll move to public comment. So let's start with Commissioner Filer.
Yes, thank you, Assemblymember Ward, for everything you do. This is back to you earlier were discussing about the rocks with the wrapped anti-Semitic comments put on, people's lawns, and there were many people in our community down here in Los Angeles that were impacted by that. I'm sorry, I just didn't catch, you said there was some legislation passed
Yeah.
around that. Can you just review that again with me really quickly?
Of course. So AB 3024 was the bill number. It's signed into law. And so what this empowers is your city attorney or your district attorney now has a tool in their tool chest to be able to go after individuals who are committing this act. So if they are, by definition, as we have defined hate littering in the code right now, in the cover of night, leaving material that is with the intent to terrorize or cause harm upon certain communities, and they're putting this on people's private property, on their doorsteps, on their personal vehicles. There is a tool now for city attorneys to be able to go after those individuals and find them for a violation of the Ralph Civil Rights Act.
Great, thank you so much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Filer. Vice Chair Salcedo.
Thank you so much, Chair Roybal. Thank you also so much, Assemblymember Ward, for everything that you do for all of us. It really means a lot that we do have a champion that really takes bold moves to address the multiple issues that we continue to experience as a community. So my immense gratitude for everything that you do for all of us. I want to introduce myself. I'm not sure if you know who I am, but my name is Bambi Salcedo, and I do have the privilege to be the president and the CEO of the Trans-Latino Coalition, which is now the biggest translator organization in the United States. And I also have the honor to be part of this amazing group of people who are commissioners. As you know, transgender and conforming intersex people, also known as TGI people, continue to be political pawns, right? There's many different things that are happening across the United States that are impacting our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We are seeing a migration of TGI people from other states trying to come to our states, thinking, that it's a safer state, which it is. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we are prepared in our states to support these individuals, or even to support the individuals who are already here on an intentional way from the federal governments. And I'm wondering if there are any efforts from the advisory council to, to the legislative caucus to find ways to really support TGI people here in California from the federal government. Like, I can give an example for healthcare services, for instance, and other ways.
Yeah. No, thank you. I can talk very broadly because this is an active conversation with a lot of minds, and not, far from just, myself. There are a lot of people that are having sort of an overview of, the sad roadmap of what needs to be done and what we need to protect. I would argue that California not only is today, but will continue to be next year even better and safer space, having thought so critically about these protections and the state support that needs to go into community members that are being targeted by federal administrators. We know that in areas of education, in healthcare, in documentation, and other key areas, there's sort of like the early identified needs that need a close attention and bolstering of support to be able to support specifically the TGI community, but others as well that may see them downstream on attacks. And to the extent that we have done also with reproductive care needs. We need to be thinking critically about gender affirming care and making sure that California has the extra support it needs when individuals in their home states are sadly denied these services for life-saving care, that as Americans, they're not going to be left behind, and we can make up that gap to every extent that we can. So we're monitoring the threats. We're sort of taking that ongoing list of what we need to do to both protect but also make up for some of the needs that are out there right now. And this is going to be an active conversation, Bambi. So I'm looking forward to working with you as you're seeing these things and you're hearing from community members about what their most immediate needs are.
Thank you,
Thank you
Vice
so
Chair
much.
Salcedo. I just want to do a quick time check. We have Assemblymember Ward until a quarter before the hour, and we still have to get to public comment. So just keep that in mind. Commissioner Levin.
Thank you, and thank you for coming, Assemblyperson Ward. I really appreciate it. It's the work of the Assembly that got this commission established, and the wonderful people who arranged this on the legislative side. Interestingly enough, this occurred during the first Trump administration. And one of the things that I was concerned about at the time was making this commission permanent, which it is not. So I'd love to have Assembly folks and state Senate folks who have been materially involved in hate to be more involved with our hearings. And I would also like to have more of the subject matter research and data experts get out there so that you can hear it, but also the public. Because one of the things that we are seeing, and one of the things we know about prejudice, is that there is a printed circuit of stereotypes that label certain people as legitimate targets for aggression, as Dr. Robin Williams from Cornell said. What we are now having, and we've seen in October alone, over $20 million spent on ads targeting the transgender community. So one of the things that I'm concerned about is during this last administration, we were able to have hearings at the Senate, U.S. Senate. We were able to have an invigorated U.S. Department of Justice enforcing among one of the first prosecutions was a South Carolina homicide of a transgender woman. What we are looking at now is the president saying that on day one, he's going to do a variety of things, including go after birthright citizenship, which is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. So what I would like to do is hold out this olive branch to these wonderful people that we have in our state legislature, among the most active and hardworking legislatures in the nation, a real full-time professional legislature. And what I'd like to do, not only for our friends in the transgender community, and this is important, we just can't have the LGBTQI+ community out there making this call that ordered liberty requires that we protect the civil rights of religious minorities, the right of people to associate and identify themselves as they are. In addition to making sure that needs, particularly with minors, with respect to medical conditions and fair treatment in schools, is not only pursued by the wonderful caucus that we have in the rainbow community, but the allies that you have vigorously in these other communities. Additionally, we are seeing this year so far with the data we have for 2024 from police departments that I've gotten, records for anti-Jewish hate crime. We're also seeing increases in anti-Muslim. So bottom line is, when we have a variety of conflicts around the world and targeting stereotypically the most vulnerable residents among us, we might benefit from having subject matter experts tell you what data and research we have, as well as community folks telling you about the shared experiences. So perhaps I could sit down with you sometime in San Diego to talk more about this. But we need each other crucially at this time when we are not only not going to get the help that we've gotten from the federal institutions, but indeed we're going to see concerted efforts against people, not only the transgender community, but the undocumented community as well as others. So if we could keep these dialogues open, I think that would be wonderful. And if you could just look at the wonderful commissioners that we have here, I think we would benefit from also having, anytime there's a hate-related piece of legislation out, having someone from the legislature come and talk to us, even if we're not going to make an endorsement at that time, but be able to have it out there and have subject matter experts chime in and get comment from the public. Thank you so much for coming. Hopefully, I won't violate anything by having lunch with you, but I think there'd be some really great work that's being done here that I could tell you to more in depth. I want to thank specifically Commissioner Andrea Beth Damsky, who has done so much in this area. Thank you both.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you, Chair. Assemblymember Ward, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I want to echo Commissioner Levin's comments about the fact that this commission is chartered for a short period of time. We're looking for someone who would be willing to carry legislation to increase the term and the duration of this commission. I'm gonna, in the interest of your time and the other commissioners who want to speak, I'm gonna keep my comments short and just say thank you and leave it at that.
Thank you. I know I'll see you soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Damsky. Commissioner Che.
Thank you. I want to also echo our deep appreciation for your public specifically around addressing hate, Assemblymember Ward. Forgive me, I have a very technical question to ask you about the bill AB 3024. I understand that the bill is an attempt to expand the definition of intimidation by threat of violence. And I was just curious how we were able to navigate the free speech issue.
Right.
And because obviously that's something that I represent, Stop API Hate and Chinese for Affirmative Action. And we deal a lot with trying to address harassment, which of course is verbal harassment, which of course is protected speech. Yeah.
Yes. And so again, we had to think, many of us thought, round and round about making sure that we were going after the act and not the speech, right? That is something that we can, define and protect against. And speech, of course, runs into First Amendment issues. And so I wouldn't say that it actually probably modified the definition of a fear of intimidation. That is still something that's already defined by itself, but it applied the action of hate littering as we are defining it, right? The sort of, I'm gonna remake up the definition right now, but it's kind of the significant duplication of material that is targeting protected class individuals, and being subjected without their consent on people's personal property. We're defining what hate littering is, and then for things that are already defined as far under the civil code, applying that to these acts. And I think that has been able to get us to a place where this is enforceable.
Thank you, Commissioner Che. Thank you, Assemblymember Ward. It looks like we have one public comment. So Monica, can we unmute Greg DeJere? Welcome, Greg. It's a pleasure to have you back at the commission meeting. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ward, for all the work you've done, especially on the hate littering bill. I was especially impressed by the care you took to avoid stepping on the First Amendment rights. The First Amendment rights are so important to our communities that are fighting for justice that we don't want to do anything to limit those. And I was glad to hear that you're considering further legislation for this year. I work with I'm the civil rights advocate for the ARC of California Developmental Disability Group, and work with other civil rights groups. And we will be approaching legislators and this commission asking for support for some legislation. And since we're speaking to the commission, I'll say I'm especially glad that to hear you say that you'd be open to receiving recommendations from the commission.
Yes, yes, my office is. We're actively taking a lot of requests coming in as it right now, and I think most know we've got a deadline by the end of February to sort of set in stone what our individual legislative packages are going to be.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you,
Thank you.
Assembly Member Ward. It doesn't look like there are any other items or raised hands for public comment. Monica, is there any email public comment?
No public comment via email.
And Shanna, is there any public comment in the room in Los Angeles?
No public comment.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Assemblymember Ward, for joining us this morning. We hope your child feels better.
Me too.
Thanks for being a great
Thank you,
parent.
everybody. Yeah, I really appreciate being with you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Great.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Assemblymember Ward.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Commissioner Damsky, for inviting Assemblymember Ward to join us today.
My pleasure.
Let's move on to our next agenda item, which is our informational presentation on restorative justice. It is my great pleasure to welcome back our former commission colleague, Professor Shireen Sanar. Shireen Sanar is a professor at Stanford Law School, a current fellow at the Center for the Advanced Study of the Behavioral Sciences, and a former member of this commission. Her scholarship focuses on how the law addresses political violence, including terrorism and hate crimes. She has published articles on civil rights and national security in top academic legal journals and in popular media, including the Washington Post and USA Today. Shireen served on this commission from September 2022 to 2024 as an appointee of Governor Gavin Newsom. She's also testified on anti-Asian hate violence before the U.S. House of Representatives Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties. From 2004 to 2009, she was a civil rights lawyer with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and then the Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco. Commissioner Sanar, former Commissioner Sanar, Professor Sanar, it is a pleasure to see you and to welcome you back to the commission.
Thank you very much, and it is good to be back at a commission meeting. I just want to provide some context on this informational session and on the broad issue of restorative justice in the hate crimes context before turning it over to Professor Shemtov. And unfortunately, our second panelist, Professor Talia Gonzalez, was not able to join us today. So in its first annual report from 2023, the Commission noted that one of its key goals was to develop recommendations to prevent hate crimes. And part of the goal the Commission identified was to, quote, explore innovative practices for reducing recidivism, particularly non-carceral solutions. And the report went on to flag restorative justice models as one practice for the Commission to explore. And the Commission identified that as a priority because communities and community organizations have often expressed interest in exploring how to prevent and respond to hate crimes in ways that reduce reliance on the criminal justice system. So while the political efforts have sometimes responded to hate crimes, mostly by urging that more behavior be criminalized and the penalties be stepped up. Often community groups, particularly those representing marginalized communities and those who have often had very challenging relationships with law enforcement and the criminal justice system, have looked to and encourage experimentation with alternatives. So just to give one example from recent years, the Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco in recent years has created a restorative justice and legal clinic to support the needs of victims of violence, including through exploring solutions outside the criminal justice system. And that was one of the organization's responses to the surge in anti-Asian hate violence during the pandemic. And the group is also working with partner organizations to build a network of restorative justice providers in the Bay Area, to create trainings for restorative justice facilitators on the specific cultural competence issues around API communities, and also to focus, to educate API-focused community groups on restorative justice approaches. So this is part of a 3-year pilot program funded by the California Department of Social Services as part of the API equity budget that the legislature funded several years ago. And there are other organizations, Community Works West, Impact Justice, and others who have been doing this work in our state for quite some time, though typically not with a focus on identity-based harm in particular. So I hope that the Commission can continue to engage these groups and this work in its subsequent work. Personally, I came to this issue several years ago when I ran a Stanford Law School policy lab with students on alternative approaches to hate crimes. And that was in collaboration with the Brennan Center for Justice in New York. And we brought together experts on restorative justice, hate crimes, and criminal justice reform. And based on that expert convening and the research that the lab produced, we issued a report in 2021. And I believe Monica has just sent out the link for those who are interested in seeing that report. The top line conclusion was that restorative justice programs may be helpful in mending the harm experienced by victims of hate crimes, while also offering meaningful accountability for those who caused the harm. And at the same time, we concluded that there are many questions yet to address about restorative justice practices, and that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So it's not applicable to or available for every case for a whole variety of reasons, including the fact that the typical vision of restorative justice is that programs are voluntary and should be used only when the person harmed and the person committing the harm are open to it. So I want to note just a couple of more things about kind of conceptually what restorative justice is before I give you some examples. And in part, I'm going to be slightly more detailed on kind of this conceptual framework because one of our presenters was not able to make it today. So restorative justice is a really broad term. When we're talking about restorative justice, we're talking broadly about mechanisms to repair the harm from a crime or from an incident or act in ways that bring together people who have been affected by it. We are also talking about really a wide variety of approaches, and you can picture them as being on a spectrum from prevention to response. So at the prevention end, restorative justice as a term can include programs like conflict resolution, dialogue initiatives that aim to address tension within communities, for instance, in a school or other community, before they actually result in any particular incident, let alone a crime. At the other end, restorative justice can also be a response to actual hate crimes that have occurred and can replace traditional punishments either wholly or in part. In addition, when we talk about restorative justice, we're talking about programs that are on a spectrum related to their relationship with the criminal justice system. So at one end, there are programs that are entirely independent of the criminal justice system, that are community-led programs, for example, again, in schools, perhaps in geographic communities, sometimes at the workplace. And those aim, again, to resolve conflicts outside the criminal legal system. Others are connected to the criminal legal system, but seek to divert cases and people from more conventional prosecution or punishment. For example, it might be that somebody who has been arrested for a crime but is not charged, or they may be charged, but then the charge may be dismissed if they successfully complete a restorative justice alternative program. And that alternative program can be located either, in some cases, they're located within government institutions, other times, and quite often, they're done in collaboration with community groups. And one of the core ideas here is that while victims sometimes say that they want somebody, the person who harmed them, to be punished, when you probe a little more deeply, what many victims want is to make sure that they are safe and that the person who harmed them doesn't repeat the harm to another human being. And so restorative justice can often provide a level of personal acknowledgement, validation, and repair to victims that they don't always, or maybe even often, find in traditional criminal prosecution and sentencing. Existing restorative justice programs have handled hate crimes as part of their work, but we see that particularly in the US, typical programs don't focus on hate crimes or identity-based harm, although they might address those kinds of cases as part of the broader mix. So I'll give you just a couple of examples from the Stanford Law School Brennan Center report. So about a decade ago, a local mosque in the Bay Area was vandalized, and Community Works West, which is a group in the East Bay, assisted the mosque leadership and the youth involved in the incident to come together in a restorative process. And through that process, and after process of meeting with both groups involved, they came together. The youth apologized for what they had done. They attended a service at the mosque with their families, and they engaged in other community service efforts. And the criminal prosecution did not go forward. Just another example from the report. This is further afield in Washington, D.C. A group of youth several years ago assaulted a trans woman on the subway. And the restorative justice program in the local district attorney's office handled the case of a 16-year-old who was among the participants in the assault. And again, after a process of intensive preparation by a trained facilitator who met with the young person involved as well as the victim, they agreed to participate in a reparative encounter. They met. Apparently, it was quite an emotional encounter where the youth heard directly from the victim about the suffering that he had caused and ultimately apologized, agreed to do several things, including promising to attend school more regularly. And they ultimately worked out an agreement and agreed that the charge against him would be dropped once he had completed those agreements. There are other examples in the report, including restorative justice approaches to an anti-Semitic assault in New York and an anti-Black hate crime in Wisconsin. In other countries, in Canada and the UK, among other places, there are broader programs that address hate crimes and identity-based harm as not just as kind of one-off incidents that are part of their work, but that are the focus of those programs. And in the last several years, there's been, I would say, much more interest within the US at various levels, whether it's through various government organizations, through nonprofits. The Aspen Institute recently put out a report on restorative justice in the hate crime context. So there's increased interest in understanding how these approaches might be applicable and in what cases they might be applicable to hate crimes. So I will just, I know that I'm almost out of time. I'll just flag one quick question or issue raised with restorative justice programs, and then quickly introduce our presenter, Professor Shemtov. So there are always questions of capacity. Restorative justice programs are not available in every jurisdiction, and they're often limited in scope. Many, for example, just respond to minors or to the lowest level offenses, even though there is research indicating that they could be effective for a wider range of people and cases. That is among the questions and issues faced by restorative justice. But right now, if someone wants to engage in a restorative justice approach to an actual incident, there's often not in their jurisdiction a particular program that's available to them. So I will just transition to introducing Professor Shemtov, who I first came across because he had done quite an interesting research study evaluating the Make It Right restorative justice program for youth in San Francisco. And that study, which was also published in academic papers, as well as by the California Policy Lab, I'll let him explain it, but it's kind of an important study evaluating some of the safety and recidivism outcomes for hate crime. Professor Shemtov is an assistant professor of economics at UCLA. He's also faculty research fellow at the National Bureau of Economic Research, a research affiliate at the Institute of Labor Economics, faculty affiliate at the California Policy Lab, and an invited researcher at the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab at MIT. And his research focuses on labor economics, criminal justice, crime, and applied econometrics. And he has published widely in leading academic journals. So thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Professor Shemtov.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone can hear me. I have some slides. Should I share screen, or should I wasn't sure what's the right format. I can.
Oh, feel free to share your screen, but I also have the slides if you prefer we present.
Yeah,
up to you.
perfect. Yeah. I think you can give me a thumbs up if it's all working. So I think Shirin introduced me. I'm going to talk to you today about some insights about restorative justice conferencing from the study I conducted jointly with Stephen Raphael and Elisa Skog. Afterwards, I'm happy I'm going to try to give you some comments and thoughts about scalability and the applicability of restorative justice in other contexts, specifically in the context of hate crime. And I'll be happy to address any questions as time allows. So just to state what everyone knows, but I just want to have it out there. The US criminal justice system is primarily punitive in terms of how it's set up. Two things that I think are less addressed in the system currently and are very much the focus of restorative justice is trying to understand the needs of offenders, or as in the language of restorative justice, the individuals who are accused of the crime, and the victims have a very minor role in the proceedings, support their needs and their representations. In the language of restorative justice, they usually refer to as the harmed party. So the alternative approach of restorative justice usually focused around a conference. That's the focused event. And in that conference, the victim, the accused, and supporters of both sides are supposed to come together and try to make amends for the incident that took place. There's a lot of preparation work that is done before that conferencing. And after that conferencing, there's basically the accused person gets like a homework assignment of trying to repair the harms. So, but that is like basically one focal event that if it goes well, that's the main thing that's supposed to give the harmed party its closure and to allow things to move forward. I want to emphasize that there's several components in this conference. So first of all, emphasizing the understanding what was the causes of the incident is a key factor, because we want to prevent it from happening again. That's the main thing that restorative justice is focused on. And then the accountability is a very important aspect. And in many ways, repair for the victim happens through the accused, the responsible youth, taking accountability for their harm and expressing that. So this means that a necessary condition for restorative justice is the willingness to take responsibility. So if someone, for example, you look at a court case where the defendant says, I didn't do it, you got the wrong person, that will not be a case that's eligible for restorative justice just because there's a bad fit. It's not that there's anything wrong in either side. So I think it's important to understand which type of situations are suitable. And unlike traditional criminal justice proceedings, the victim has a very prominent role. So think of a regular proceedings, they can take an enormous amount of time, right? There could be a lot of delays, and the victim is very passive throughout. Lawyers talk lawyers' language, legal terms, and the victim is basically a bystander. Here, the victim has a very active role in the conferencing. It takes responsibility for what happened to them. They face the person that caused them harm, and they demand them to be accountable. So I want to emphasize this is not this is a very how to say it? It's a very onerous process. It's a process that takes a lot from the person who's accused. So it requires them to take a lot of ownership. What I'm telling you today, or the empirical evidence, is based on an evaluation or insights from an evaluation of the Make It Right program. It's quite a unique program that was piloted in San Francisco by now former DA both in San Francisco and LA, George Gascon. And it was focused on individuals charged with felony offenses. So it's once the DA decided to file charges, they waited, they didn't file charges, and they went and they offered the defendants the opportunity to participate in the restorative justice conferencing. And if they failed in the process, then they would face felony charges. A unique feature of this program is that there was a randomization. So it's just like a medical RCT to understand the effects of a vaccine or of a treatment. Here you had a treatment group, a control group, and they were both randomly assigned. So members of each group were comparable to each other, which basically means we can look at the outcomes of this group and compare them to the outcomes of the control group, and we get exactly the average causal effect of the intervention. There were some eligibility constraints on the program, and like Shireen was saying, these programs so it depends on how they're implemented. So a lot of times they can't be instead of a prosecution because the crimes are too severe. In this case, it was felony offenses, so they're quite severe, but given certain limitations, they were allowed to be instead of a prosecution. So it was also a diversion program. So it didn't include cases where the victim had a serious injury or there was a use of a gun. There was no gang affiliation. And it related to individuals who were not on probation or detention at the time of the arrest. Those are some of the key issues. And what I was saying before about the conference, this is what I want you to have in mind. So you have like a picture of like this, people are sitting in a circle. There's a lot of preparation work. And the preparation work is essential because the conference, you have the victim there, and you don't want them to get re-victimized. So you have to make sure that the person who is accused of the harm is willing to take responsibility and is able to participate. On the other hand, you also don't want to harm the defendant, the person, because if there's no chance of reconciliation in this sense, then there's no point of the conferencing. So there's a lot of work that's been done by the facilitators in both making sure that the accused party is willing to own their action, write an apology letter, but also that the harmed party comes with reasonable expectations. So to give you an example, think of a youth who comes from a very high socioeconomic status, and they stole the Mac laptop, and then they broke it. They don't have the financial means to financially compensate the victim. Maybe they can give a partial compensation or do some work to reflect the taking ownership. But the victim also needs to come with reasonable expectations about what the the accused can do. So there's a lot of preparation work that happens before the conference. Then there is the conference, and then there's a development of a plan to move forward, which is called like the agreement. And then everyone signs that agreement. And in order to complete the program, then after the conferencing, the role of the victim basically ends. And then there's a post-conferencing monitor that helps the youth to fulfill what they committed to. So for example, if the youth would say, I didn't go to school, or I had fights with my parents and that got me to be very frustrated, then one of the things they do is they follow up and make sure that the issues that caused them to be involved in the incidents are being addressed, are being resolved, that the youth is getting some help in those challenges. This is a summary of basically of everything that happened in the program. This picture is also in the paper that's on my website, but I would just flag a few numbers here. So first of all, a case is randomized, treated, control. So if you just compare these two things, it gives you the bottom line numbers in terms of one dimension, which is recidivism. So are these programs causing youth to participate less in crime? And we see very stark, very meaningful reductions in the rates of rearrest. The other two things I wanted to take away from here is that youths who were assigned to make it right and then found unsuitable or didn't complete the program had relatively similar rearrest rates as those who were in the control group, which I think basically tells you unless you completed the program, we don't really see any evidence of gains. Youths who actually completed the program had remarkably lower rates of rearrests, and I think it's quite important. These figures try to visually show you the numbers I said before, because a picture is always nicer. So what you see on the x-axis is days since an individual was referred to the program. So days from reference. And the y-axis, you see the share of individuals that got rearrested. The blue line refers to the youths who are in the Make It Right group. The black line to youths who are in the control group. And as you can see, the youths who are in the control group who face a standard felony prosecution have remarkably higher rates of rearrest, even 4 years afterwards. If I focus on felony rearrest, you see a very similar pattern. I hope I convinced you that this program works in the sense of reducing rearrest. There was very little discussion or empirical gathering of data on the victims, so we don't know too much about their satisfaction or their healing. From other studies, there's a collage of evidence that is supportive of restorative justice being good for the victims, or at least better than the usual criminal proceedings, which are not ideal for victims. Two things I want to emphasize. So this was a very small pilot study. It had 143 youths participating in the randomization. So I want you to think of this more as a proof of concept rather than like saying it works. This is like, if we think this is like the proof of concept, and then if we're in the land of in the medical literature, now the CDC should request a large-scale experiment. So that's basically where we're now. We need to find a place that will be willing to do a large-scale evaluation. And some of the questions the large-scale evaluation should ask is this scalability? Is this just something that, because we're great monitors and facilitators in this setting, or is it something we can scale up? Is it something we can use also for different types of offenses? So low-level offenses are generally less suitable for restorative justice because you need something that is a meaningful stick if the youth is not willing to fulfill their end. Because if someone got, for example, stopped for, I don't know, for painting something on the street, they will say like, I don't want all this hassle of apologizing and all of this. I'm just give me my fine. I'm going to go on my way. So you need something that there was a meaningful harm to generate a cooperation. Usually, at least that's what other studies have found. Hate crime could be a good option. I think so it is, but we have very little studies on it. So I think it's a great setting to have more research on. And let me end with just showing you one quote by a participant from the program, because just to remind you, there's actual people behind all of these numbers. So this is a youth who participate in the program, and Community Works West is the nonprofit that administers it. And there, I had multiple interviews with them. They really do amazing work. I just read it out loud, and I will pass the floor. This program really helped me. I'm not the only one to see that, but other people around me see the positive effect the program had on me. It will change your life. I can say that. Community Works really changed who I am as a person. And, you know, after talking to the facilitators there and to the conference organizers and so on, I have to say, they're amazing. And it's really people who have come with a lot of experience, but they also demand accountability. They don't cuddle, they support. And I think that's a very important distinction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Sinar, did you have any wrap-up comments before we open it up for questions?
No, I think we can open it up for questions at this point. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor Sinar. Thank you, Professor Shem-Tov, for your presentations. Very interesting material. And so I'll now open it up for questions and discussion by the commission. Commissioner Che. You're on mute, Commissioner Che.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Shem-Tov. I will, we work with victims directly, and I will just affirm that there seems to be a lot more appetite to give youth a second chance, and also how disempowering it is for victims to go through the criminal justice system, because they usually don't have very much to say. So I was really intrigued with your presentation. I had a question specifically about the approach, because we've also heard where there's an arm of restorative justice within the criminal justice system that has failed victims because they didn't provide adequate support. I'd love to hear more about the mechanics, because there were problems with apology letters being inadequate, community service not meaningful. So I'd wonder if you could say more about that, please.
Yes, of course. So the way it worked in San Francisco is that the handling DA, which we talked to a lot because there was one DA, ADA throughout the process, basically asked the victims first if they're willing that the case will go to restorative justice. She told us that in our context, in 100% of the cases, the victim agreed, which confirms what you were saying about appetite. Regarding the letters of apology, I think that's exactly right. And Community Works West did amazing work, I think, saying to the youth, if you're not willing to do it, and if you can't take accountability, then it might not be anything bad with you, but this channel might not be the right one for you, because we can't re-victimize. And I think that's a very important thing when you think about who's eligible for this, because there could be a lot of youth that would really want to put in this kind of programs, and they could potentially benefit a lot, but they have to do a certain step, and no one can do it for them. And if you can give them the support to do that step, that's amazing. But sometimes if they can't, and we saw, for example, I heard stories about defense attorneys who really advocated that their client will go there, but the client didn't really want to go there. So, and I think that's an issue, because we need to give all the support so the youth can do it, but at the end they have to be the one doing it. Otherwise, they can re-victimize the victim.
Thank you, Commissioner Chick. Commissioner Levin.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation, and Commissioner Sinar, thank you for pursuing this issue. As we talked in subcommittee meetings, Professor, you had talked about the necessity of careful selection. When we look, for instance, at Arizona last year, 31% of known offenders were 18 or under. 50% were 24 and under. So it would seem, and again, your mileage may vary by jurisdiction, but I think what's been established is within the filtering that you look at, for instance, recidivism, whether it's a first offense, age, and type of crime. So, for instance, in Los Angeles, at least through the first couple of months, because we don't have LAPD data yet, although there is going to be a release, I believe, Wednesday by the Human Relations Commission. So keep looking. But in any event, only about 20% were aggravated assaults. About 2/3 were other crimes. So if you could elaborate the selection process, I think that's important. The other thing that I would say, and I have tremendous respect for Commissioner Sinar's work on this, but I do think there's a gap in one of the things that we look at, and that is within penalty enhancements, there are sentencing enhancements, and there might be things where we still want to preserve some kind of supervision. What do I mean? Red flag laws. I don't think people who have been convicted of hate crimes, even if they have their records expunged, I don't think all of them should have access to firearms, for instance. We saw that in the case of the shooter in LA who was going towards Jewish congregants and shooting them. But anyway, what I'd like to ask you is if you could just go into a bit more detail on how important the selection process is, because as UCLA Professor Ed Dunbar said, there are some very skilled sociopaths out there who would go through a system feigning some kind of forgiveness when they really don't. So what I'd love to hear is just a little bit more about the selection process, because what I think we're looking at is where we're underutilizing these types of responses. But from what you told me, the selection criteria and application are so important. If you could just elaborate a bit more on that, I'd love it. And thank you so much for your work in this field. And thank you, Commissioner Sinar, for your attention to this important issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Professor?
Of course. So, Commissioner Levin, thank you for your comments. I think you said two things, so let me try to reiterate and see if I can address them well. One was the eligibility criteria of the individuals. The other is both, I think related, is which sanctions we want to have in mind in addition to the restorative justice program. So there's different people have different views on whether restorative justice should be a completely diversion program or come hand in hand with other sanctions. So, for example, Community Works West, which was the organization that administered the Make It Right program, was very adamant that it will only be a diversion program. That meant that they had a lot of restrictions. So certain cases were not eligible. So if you think of someone who committed an attempted murder, they shot someone, most jurisdictions will say they're not going to be diverted. So then the question is, should we not do restorative justice or should go in addition? I personally, I'm a bit more on the mind frame of mixing tools has a lot of benefits, so we don't need to rule out one option relative to the another. So one thing could be no access to firearms for X periods, certain monitoring, certain lack. You can do certain punishments and then removing enhancement potentially if you do the restorative justice and fulfill it successfully. There are different, I think there are different mixes that can be done. But I think if it's administered rightly, I think it has a lot of potential, but administered rightly means that you have a very strong care for public safety and the victim safety. And I think that's it doesn't mean that this is how you say it, you rubber stamp people through the process. It should be a very strong process, and at least in my view, it could easily be in addition to other means. I hope I addressed the point well enough, and I think Professor Sinar has additional thoughts.
Thank you, Professor Sinar.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of pieces to this, which is, one is that some programs do have these categorical restrictions based on age or level of crime or so forth. And I think we've gotten into this a little bit in some of the prior remarks, but I think rather than necessarily think of eligibility in terms of broad categories, and sometimes programs do that by necessity in terms of design, but rather than think of it in terms of, well, there are certain offenses for which somebody is not able to participate in a restorative justice process, it might be better to think about it in terms of the individual criteria. So as Professor Shemtov mentioned, there is some research suggesting that higher level offenses are actually more suited to restorative justice. And one reason he mentioned was that the stick of a criminal prosecution being available in those cases. I think the other reason that I've seen in some of the literature is that it may also be that the storytelling effect of going through a restorative justice encounter in the case of a more sort of emotional experience, one where there were kind of identifiable victims to a crime compared to, say, something like, I don't know, an act of vandalism or something which was seen as more sort of diffuse. But that emotional impact of having somebody who's a victim recount their harm, that might also mean that it's actually higher level offenses which are more suited to the process. So, and similarly with age, a lot of programs have focused first on juveniles because it's seen as more politically viable. So, and there's this thought that maybe juveniles are more prone to being able to be to change their behavior, to be reformed, all of that. But, we do have examples of restorative justice encounters involving older people who were similarly affected. So rather than think of it in terms of just pure categories, I think it's important to think of it in terms of some of the more individualistic criteria of like, what kind of person is suitable and is willing to acknowledge the harm and is able to benefit from this sort of process and participate in it. So for instance, in a hate crimes case, if somebody is what we might think of as a mission offender, someone who's deeply committed to their prejudices, who
Commissioner
person
Professor Sinar, you froze for just a moment. Could you rewind like 10 seconds?
Sure. I hope my internet connection is not unstable. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. I was just saying that a person who is considered a hardened kind of mission offender in a hate crime context, someone who is deeply committed to their prejudices and is acting out of a sense of mission, may be completely unamenable to a restorative justice process, because the idea that a single encounter would benefit them, it just may not be the case for someone that deeply convinced of their harm. And you also, in all likelihood, do not want to put a victim of such an offense together with the person who has that level of intense kind of hardened prejudice. And similarly, there are other kinds of scenarios. For example, if, scenarios where mental illness plays a very significant role, it may be that someone in that scenario might need other kinds of treatment and diversion. Criminal justice, punishment may also not be effective, but it may be that they need some other sort of response rather than a process that requires them to engage, with the victim or proxy for their victim. The last kind of comment that I wanted to make was just that there is a political challenge here, and even with the Make It Right program in San Francisco, where you have something like Professor Shemtov's beautiful research study showing that even on the criteria of recidivism and public safety, it's actually more effective than the criminal justice system. And yet, when there was a pilot effort to expand the program to 18 to 24-year-olds in San Francisco, it encountered some resistance. It ultimately, with the DA Brooke Jenkins, did not move forward. And, very recently, one of the private foundations that had committed to funding that program pulled some of their support because they said that there wasn't enough seriousness in implementing it within the city of San Francisco. So, unfortunately, there's political resistance based on sometimes a misperception that these programs do not hold people accountable or not as effective for public safety. And I think that's something that we really need to address is the political dynamics around these issues.
Thank you, Professor Stanara. I don't see any more questions from commissioners, so we'll move to public comment. I do see two requests for public comment. We'll start with Greg DeJear. Greg, welcome back. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Stanara. I've said this to you privately, but I'll say it to everybody publicly here that whenever we talk about, I talk to anybody about restorative justice sentencing in the field of hate crimes, I always tell them that if they haven't read your Brennan Center and Stanford Law Report, they're guilty of malpractice. My comment is that in 2004, when I was working with Senator Sheila Kuehl to enact what became California's hate crime law, we included restorative justice as one of the goals of sentencing. We didn't get into diversion, but we specifically made it restorative justice for the immediate victim and for the community terrorized by it. And that's, as your paper pointed out, a big challenge. And so I'd like to hear your comments about how to deal with that. Also, in general, what recommendations might you have for this commission about how to proceed with this? This is in 2004 we said that the Judicial Council should adopt a rule of court concerning sentencing, and we hoped that they would get into restorative justice. They did not. They just simply adopted a rule of court that just word for word used the language of the statute. But what might the commission do or recommend that anyone else do about this, you think?
Thank you, Greg. Professor Stanara, would you like to respond?
Sure, and thank you for your comment also on our report. I think in terms of responding to the needs of a broader community, that is a really important feature of restorative justice in the hate crime context, because, as we know, with hate crimes, it's not just about the individual victims, but about a broader community. And some restorative justice approaches do involve the broader community. I think that is maybe easiest in contexts where there's, for example, an organization that has been the target of a hate crime, and the organization is clearly identified with a particular community. So if it's a place of worship or an LGBTQ community center or something of that sort, then it may be that there is a natural constituency, a membership, a group of people who are not a perfect representation of a community that's targeted, but it's more than one person who may be able to participate in a restorative justice conference. And it depends on the design of the program, but some restorative justice programs do involve the participation of a broader segment of a community. I think it might be a little bit harder in cases where the experience does target individual victims, but it's not as clear how you would identify a broader community to participate. Although even there, there are different formats in which individuals can bring additional people to, for example, a conference that might be able to involve other members of the community. So not a complete answer at all, but that's just one point. In terms of moving forward, I think one interesting approach might be for this commission to partner with something like the California Commission on a reform of the penal code, which is oriented at criminal justice reform more broadly, and particularly because most restorative justice programs are not specifically based on identity-based harm, and for capacity reasons, it may be that some sort of joint exploration into what can be done to support and further study restorative justice programs in California might be one step forward.
Thank you, Professor Sinar. We have one more public comment. Don, welcome to the commission meeting. You have 2 minutes.
Good morning. It's an honor to be with you today. Hello, Commissioner Levin. Long time no see. My name is Don Han. I am representing Groundswell, formerly the Orange County Human Relations. I'm also a former member of Cairo. Professor Sinar and Professor Shantov, thank you so much for all your work in presenting restorative justice and the research on RJ work. This is our 8 years implementing RJ work in K-12 here in Orange County. And we have done many cases in terms of, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, helping our school and school partners in addressing hate incidents on campuses, such as racial slur. We don't just do a process of student to student, we also do what we call upstream work, which is educating our educator on how to use RJ process in terms of addressing incidences in their classroom. And you're right, this work needs lots of understanding and lots of building the trust that the process work, right? And also at the same time, I could share with you that when we launched this program in Orange County 8 years ago, it took us 3 years to really educate our public, not our school partner, to understand the process. Oftentimes, when people don't understand the process of restorative justice work, we often get pushed back. Oh, it didn't work, or etc. So the last few years have been fruitful for us because we have been able to navigate and utilize the tools to assist our school campuses. I have done 2 pro bono cases of working with hate crime offender through the RJ process, and do a wrap up about how to build a community of belonging. And it's been very successful. I would love to share some of that practice and our experience with anyone and your research as well. So thank you so much for being proactive partners in promoting RJ work.
Thank you so much for your public comment, Don. Before we close and say thank you to the professors, any last questions from the commission? All right. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Are there, Monica, are there any email public comments?
No public comment via email.
Thank you. And Shanna, are there any public comments in the room in Los Angeles?
No public comments.
All right, thank you. On behalf of the commission, thank you so much for your presentations today, Professors Sinar and Shemtov. We are very excited for you to be here. It was very educational. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And Professor Sinar, really lovely to see you again at the commission meeting. Thank you for joining us today. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next item, and then we'll take a break. I know, Commissioner Filer, you'll be departing at 10:45. So let's move on to the approval of the minutes from the October 23rd commission meeting. They are attachment A. They're also in the chat for those of you that would like to click on the link to download the minutes. Are there any discussion? Commissioner Damsky.
I'd like to move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Dansky. Has moved to approve the minutes from the October 23rd, 2024 meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Filer. Any discussion about the minutes? Again, I want to extend my thanks to Vice Chair Salcedo for chairing that commission meeting. Any edits or comments? Commissioner Levin? You're on mute, Commissioner Levin.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank Commissioner Salcedo for running that so well. Also, just on today's thing, Commissioner Damsky, thank you. One thing that I noticed was that we only had like a dozen people listed as being attending who weren't part of the commission. And one of the things I'd like to do for another time is talk about maybe some initiatives we can have for getting word about the meetings out maybe a bit better. We are having such wonderful speakers. Not saying last time, because I don't think we had I don't think we had any speakers, but particularly because, as stated before, by Assemblymember Ward and other individuals on the commission, we are getting a slash to the opportunity to expose issues, survivors, and researchers at a governmental level nationally. So I just noted that in the minutes, and perhaps at other meetings when we get to future agendas, if we could discuss how to get this wonderful material and presentations that are being made more widely disseminated. And that was it. And thank you, Chair Roybal, for just the wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Vice Chair Salcedo.
Yes, thank you so much. I just have more of a process question. I'm not sure if I can vote since I acted chair at that
Yes,
time.
you can vote. You
Okay.
are welcome to vote.
Okay.
I actually will abstain from voting on this because
Okay.
I was not present.
Yeah, just wanted to sort of like clarify that. Thank you so much.
Yes. All right. Are there any, we'll move on to public comment. Are there any public comments about, I don't see any verbal public comments about the commission meeting minutes. Monica, are there any public comments via email?
No public comment via email.
And Shanna, are there any public comments in Los Angeles?
No comments.
All right, we will move to a vote. Deputy Director Watts, will you call the roll?
Chair Roybal,
I abstain.
Vice Chair Salcedo,
Aye.
Commissioner Che,
Aye.
Commissioner Quayler, Commissioner Damsky,
Aye.
Commissioner Filer,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
Commissioner Suthers.
Aye.
Okay, it's 6 ayes.
Thank
One
you.
abstention and one
The
absent.
motion to approve the minutes is approved. Thank you, everyone. We will now take a 5-minute break. Commissioner Filer, we will be sad not to see you when we reconvene, but thank you for
Aye.
joining us, and we'll see you at the next commission meeting.
Yes.
Happy holidays and happy new year to you, since we won't get to say that to you before we get to the commission meeting.
And happy holidays and happy new year to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We will take a break. We will reconvene at 10:48. 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from our break. We will restart our meeting. Deputy Director Watts, I see you are trying to share your screen, but all I see is a black box. Do other commissioners see that?
Okay, thank you. I'm working on fixing that. Give me one moment.
And just FYI, on our agenda, we are now on item number 5, the Civil Rights Department report, which today will be given by Deputy Director Watts. Alec, whenever you're ready.
Okay, are you able to see the slides now?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the CRD report today. Today, I'd like to use the CRD report agenda item to discuss the many proactive and complementary anti-hate initiatives and programs at CRD that are designed to protect Californians from discrimination and hate violence. The motivation for this is that in many of our subcommittee meetings over the past few weeks, and as Assembly Member Ward alluded to, we've had a lot of conversations about how we are living in a particularly challenging and contentious time for many communities in California, especially after the election. So I want to review a selection of the programs across the department designed to combat hate. I encourage you to sort of take notes of these programs. Feel free to uplift them. However that looks like for you. Feel free to spread the word to your networks. I think these, again, are all designed to help people in California who are facing discrimination and hate. So I will go through just a few of these programs one at a time. I'll start with our enforcement division at CRD. This comes up a little less often in our work, but it is the core of what CRD does in a lot of ways. So we have an enforcement division which intakes, investigates, and conciliates complaints of civil rights violations in California. In case you don't know, anyone in California can file a complaint with CRD if they believe their civil rights have been violated, including the right to be free from hate violence. So the complaint, after filing a complaint, it can result in a number of outcomes, including mediation and legal action. This is just sort of an overview of the flow. When somebody submits a complaint, we determine if we have jurisdiction. If we do, we investigate, and then it can result in a number of outcomes. We also have our dispute resolution division, which mediates complaints, but it also houses the community conflict resolution unit, which I think many of you are familiar with, but it's always good to remind everyone of this. So the community conflict resolution unit, also known as CREW, is set up to assist communities with issues of hate and discrimination that have a community impact. They provide a wide range of free, confidential, and impartial services, including designing and facilitating conflict resolution processes, training, consultations, and mediation. Anyone can request their services, and we've provided the link to do that here in the slides. Of course, another program that we all know about at CRD is the California versus Hate Resource Line and Network, where anyone can call if they feel they have experienced or witnessed an act of hate. We also have our outreach and education team, which takes a proactive approach to preventing hate and discrimination by providing guidance and education about the civil rights laws in California. They do a number of things, including producing materials such as this fact sheet on the Ralph Act, which Assemblymember Ward mentioned in his remarks. And the Ralph Civil Rights Act, in case you're not familiar, prohibits acts of violence or threats of violence due to a person's protected characteristics. The Outreach and Education Unit also conducts webinars and attends community events to spread the word about the information that they create and also spread the word about the services offered by CRD. Another program of outreach and education, we've talked about this briefly, but they're designing and implementing the Welcome In program, which is essentially a program to cultivate safe and inclusive environments at businesses. Businesses who participate can train their staff on topics such as how anti-discrimination laws apply to public businesses, how and when staff can intervene to stop one customer from harassing another, and how to identify and report acts of hate. So participants who participate in this, businesses who participate in the program receive free access to CRD trainings, technical support, and public recognition for participating in the program. They also get these posters that they can post in their business. And finally, of course, we have this commission, which, as you know, serves as an advisory body to elected officials and communities on how to strengthen California's efforts to combat hate. I thought this would also be a good opportunity to remind folks of the different projects that staff are working on. I think sometimes our research projects are siloed in specific subcommittees, and it's sort of hard to see how they fit into sort of the rest of our work. So I just wanted to highlight a few that especially, I think, address the sort of proactive nature of our work. So some of the projects that we're working on right now and that we're hoping to draft to put into the next annual report include things like looking at schools and how can schools prevent hate. We're also looking at prevention from the perspective of public messaging efforts. So how can we use public messages to prevent hate? New this year is that we are looking at online hate and how that can be reduced. We're also doing work on bystander intervention trainings and looking at how they can be effectively used to prevent the escalation of hate. And finally, a newer project that we're still trying to get off the ground, but we should have it scoped and ready soon, is what are the gaps in state employee trainings to ensure government employees can respond to hate? So of course, as you know from these research activities, then what we do is we design these evidence-based policy recommendations that we can feature in our report for hate prevention, and then pass it on to the legislature and other stakeholders to pass into law or create policies around. So that's the overview of CRD programs. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Deputy Director Watts. Commissioner Chang.
Thank you so much, Deputy Director Watts. Has there been any initial assessments on the range of services and key lessons on the work of CREW? Because I know from our experience, there's just a lot of conflict that can be that can be exacerbated by how things are being framed or the exchanges by the parties involved. And I was just curious if the staff of CREW have done any initial assessment or if there's some research related to that.
Not that I'm aware of. However, they are on the line. I hesitate to put them on the spot, but I suppose Marquez, Greg, or Kendra, if any of you would like to mention this, feel free. It looks like Marquez raised his hand. You can feel free to unmute, Marquez.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful question. In terms of patterns, our work is very unique. So it's one of the challenges to this work and trying to evaluate it, as every case may have some takeaways, but they're very unique to the situation that we may be facing. And it is, I think, if there are specific interests in terms of trying to narrow down the scope of that question, because again, at the large scale level, we don't have anything right now. But I think maybe if we were to narrow it down in terms of like takeaways in any particular kind of area that you may be interested in,
Yeah,
we could give you some. They're not going to be research perfect, since, you know, we you don't have a whole lot to compare to. But I could always speak to, based on my experience of doing this, not just with Crew, but in my prior work with Community Relations Service, US DOJ. So there are takeaways from certain types of cases. But again, you know, in terms of like having research to document that there's a pattern that is very, very specific, would be very difficult. Again, that's one of the challenges, that one case will be, you know, in a school, perhaps, let's just say, and then another one would be in a community, another's that, you know, with involving a tribe. So the landscape is just so diverse that it's really difficult to extract patterns. But if you have a more specific question within one of those types of environments, you know, I'd be happy to give you my best answer.
Yeah, if I may follow up, Deputy Director Watts, specifically, and I understand not having the research or evidence-based backing, but what I would be interested in from the commissioner standpoint is, and I think feel free to not do it on the spot, but maybe come back to another commission meeting. I would like to know, for example, who tends to utilize these services? Is it institutions? Is it individuals? What's the range of offerings that you currently provide? You know, and I guess rather than patterns, it would be great to have a range of descriptions of the types of ways that you've intervened. I'm assuming that these are active or live conflicts, and you're coming in to offer, facilitate, to intervene. And so that would be the nature of the information that I would be seeking. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Commissioner Che. Marquez, Alec, is that something we could prepare for the next commission meeting or a near future commission meeting?
We can look into it. I hesitate to commit the Crew team to it, but we can look into it.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Levin.
Yes, thank you. Alec, boy, if folks who are not affiliated with the commission knew how much work he puts in to supporting this commission, they would say, you know what? Government works well when you have people of goodwill in it. One of the things that I am very concerned about is we've had various opportunities to talk about the various services that CRD provides outside of assisting the commission. Obviously, I want this commission to continue as well, but I am concerned by a couple of things. One, are cuts to the state budget that will affect things such as California versus 8 and Crew. It is not as likely that we'll be able to get as much or federal funding for similar efforts at the federal level. During the prior Trump administration, the Community Relations Service, which is the federal analog to Crew, faced some real significant headwinds. So what I would like to ask my fellow commissioners, and indeed my colleagues on the CRD, knowing that we are in this new environment where we not only have to protect vulnerable groups who are being specifically targeted, for instance, undocumented people. We just saw a terrible attack in New York related to that. And we've also seen, for instance, border vigilante militia types act out. If there was ever a time when we need to highlight the kind of effective work that is being done by the CRD, I think it's now. And what I would like to just propose is that we find as a commission better ways to help our cousins. to get across to the public. Again, we have wonderful presentations. I want this stuff to go out across the state so that we can get the kind of necessary support for programs which are going to be curtailed federally, and that we have some kind of state interest and analog in. So just throwing that out to my fellow commissioners and members of CRD, how we can continue to highlight the work at these various meetings. And again, I know I'm putting a lot on that buffet plate, right? Getting organizations and victims, getting legislators. But I want to end with this, and that is, don't take it for granted that you will have the institutional levers or the caliber. And I'm not just talking about the intellectual and experiential caliber, the moral caliber of people. 2 years. In 2 years, there will be a new gubernatorial administration, and we will all be gone. And I want to make sure that we can have this symbiotic relationship where we can highlight the important work that CRD is doing, and to get additional funding for it, because California versus Hate and the CCRU, it does not have dedicated funding forever, and these do expire. So Alec, from the bottom of my heart, and again, I could take the whole day thanking people, but it's folks like you and Andrea Beth and all the rest of these wonderful commissioners that step up to the plate. And I want to make sure that we are providing the kind of mutual support in this special time, because it's not only communities that are being targeted, it is institutions as well. When we have an idiocracy taking place in Washington, where someone who is going to be in charge of the border appeared on podcasts that had replacement theory, white nationalist folks and ideologies on, that tells you, where we're at. So I want to thank my fellow commissioners and also CRD, whatever we can do to highlight these critical efforts for the state and to maybe integrate some of the legislators to hearing that, you have my complete assistance. And thank you, Alec, for the wonderful work that you are doing for us.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Browning?
Good morning, commissioners. I just wanted to chime in and say a few things on behalf of the Newsom administration. I'm with the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, and this is very much on our radar as well. As you all may know, I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations around the state, and including houses of worship, community organizations, advocacy groups, etc. I am working with the administration on bringing philanthropic partners to the table, because this fear is very real. Not only are we worried about funding, not state funding because of the budget, but then federal funding being cut because of priorities being changed, but also the laws being changed. I know that some organizations are worried about their tax status. There's a lot of legal issues coming into play, as well as many of our organizations that support LGBTQ and immigration issues. And so there's a lot. I also work very closely with the California Nonprofit Security Grant. We're trying to adjust that to get that out to more people, more organizations. Used to be just houses of worship, but now nonprofits that do advocacy work are trying to get those grants. So all that to say is this is very much on the radar of us as well. And I was just telling Alec that one of the things that once we get this set up and moving forward, there's going to be trainings and seminars and subject matter experts that can help these nonprofits move through this process. But I want to bring the resources of California versus Hate to the table as well, because a lot of these groups are already dealing with hate crimes and dealing with the hatred that comes from it. It's just going to be expanded once the new administration comes in.
Thank you, Commissioner Browning. One last comment, and then we'll move to public comment. Vice Chair Salcedo.
Thank you so much. So I just want to first thank each and every one for everything, but I do want to also bring a concern on the previous round that happened with the funding that was announced by Caloyes. And just kind of like, thank you so much for bringing this issue, Commissioner Browning, about supporting communities, and just wanted to make sure that we understand all the different intricacies and how communities are impacted and how community need to be supported, and what are the processes that people have to go through in order to be able to be supported the way that all people need to be supported. And so I just want to appreciate the opportunity to bring this up. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Salcedo. Let's move to public comment. I don't see any requests for verbal public comment. Monica, are there any email public comment?
No public comment via email.
And Shanna, is there any public comment in the office in Los Angeles?
No public comments.
All right, thank you. And thank you again, Deputy Director Watts, for representing the department today and for your report. We will now move on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is the presentation and discussion of posts law enforcement training, Assembly Bill 449, hate crimes. As you may remember from Commissioner Damsky's thorough work on this effort, that the Commission partnered with POST, the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, to convene California versus Hate law enforcement experts and community-based organizations to produce a training for law enforcement to improve their responses to hate. Given the importance of this training, we're going to play it for everyone today in the meeting. We did send it out early to commissioners, so I hope you had an opportunity to see it, but we will play it again here today. This work was led by the Subcommittee on Law Enforcement, which is chaired by Commissioner Damsky. Commissioner Suthers also participated previously. Commissioner Damsky, is there anything you would like to say before we play the video?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know that we've discussed this video at length. We talked about the work that went into creating the content for it, the kind of group forum meetings we had with all of our community partners and organization leaders. We talked about the video itself. We talked about edits that were recommended to the Commissioner on Peace Officer Standards and Trainings. But what we did not do was actually view the video together and get a chance to discuss it. So today's the day we get to do that. I look forward to hearing your comments after the video. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Damsky. Let's roll the video.
I come home to put my key in my door and I see neighbors. But as I'm opening my door, I just hear, I'm not expecting that to come from them. They tell me to go inside. Take your ass in the house. But I would not. I was like, no, you guys, someone needs to apologize. It turns into an altercation. I'm hit in the head. So they're beating on my door, rattling my window. We thinking it's gonna break at that point. The next morning there was like blood on our door from them punching and hitting the door to try and get in.
Even one hate crime is one hate crime too many. They often go underreported, and we're seeing more people coming out of the woodwork as hateful people, and it creates a lot of tension in the community. So when there's a hate incident or hate crime, it really affects everyone.
It doesn't matter if one person appeared to be targeted. Part of what an act of hate does is it targets an entire community. So it is really important to make sure you have those relationships in place. But if you build those relationships in advance, they are much more likely to come forward and to help with other things, like making sure that other people in the community know how to access accurate information about the status of an investigation, for example.
I didn't call the police, but they came. I didn't want to admit anything, didn't feel safe to tell them that there was an altercation because they just looked ready to take someone. And as the only Black person, when I told them that, there was a racial slur said, and they're like, well, if they do have freedom of speech, you could just go inside and shut the door, let people be who they are. And the police just left. There wasn't a report taken or...
We want to make sure that communities are safe and everyone living in that community feels safe living there. And one way to get a person to feel safe is to make sure that all crimes, especially hate crimes, are reported to law enforcement.
You may be thinking, oh, I have to get to the next call and this is just a big nothing. Now you're going to impact that victim and how comfortable they feel with you. So they may not be as open to discussing the circumstances with you. They may have a sense of shame that they feel. That's going to create distrust with us, and we want to build trust.
My background is Turkish. That's my heritage, my ethnicity. A group of men stormed into the business. It was a direct target of our identity. Seeing their hatred in their eyes is the most scariest thing. They pick up weapons, they attacked, they threw chairs at us, tables. And this wasn't to vandalize. This was a hate that's shown towards our identity.
So unfortunately, in the immigrant community, there's a high level of normalization of hate. There is incredible diversity of language, and as such, it is a barrier to be able to report. They feel that things may be lost in translations, and we have even seen cases where the perpetrator will then in turn turn the situation against the victim because the victim does not have the language skills to be able to describe the situation to the officer.
We've noticed a trend that all hate crimes across all the protected characteristics have been increasing. Documenting these appropriately has allowed us to form a proactive response to combat and prevent more of these crimes from happening, as well as better investigations to prosecute the ones that have happened.
A man approached me and asked me to go to lunch. I respectfully declined, and he told me to go back to Asia, followed by 2 minutes of hateful, derogatory, and sexist remarks. And so I started recording the altercation. I didn't know if the situation would escalate or if I would even be sitting here today. I then called 911 for myself. Once the officer arrived, he told me, this is normal. It happens all the time. There's no crime here, so there's no police report. Just get in your car and go home.
If a victim comes forward and they're showing a great deal of courage, number one, right? It's important for us to take that very seriously and investigate it to the fullest extent possible.
For any law enforcement official to investigate or prosecute a hate crime, we don't have to prove that you hate that person or you hate that community overall. We just have to prove that the perpetrator targeted that victim at that moment in time because of a biased motivation.
You may be confronted with someone who is targeted for an act of hate that is a hate crime, or it may not be a crime, it may be a hate incident. Acts of hate that are not crimes are still acts of hate that cause significant harm. You can still connect people with meaningful and important resources that will help them to recover and help you to earn more trust and to make sure that you are demonstrating that you understand the impact of an act of hate.
After I shared the video on social media, it immediately went viral, which then brought 5 other victims that recognized the man from my video and stated they were also assaulted by the same man. The law enforcement contacted me and apologized for the responding officer's lack of action, took my police report as a racially motivated hate incident, spoke to all the other victims that were coming forward, and the detective was able to build a case in order to escalate to the city attorney's office to take action.
Assembly Bill 449 makes it a requirement that all departments adopt a specific hate crimes policy. When the officers respond to a type of call, they're going to know what to do in that situation, and all of the officers will be consistent with it. They need to fill out a hate crime supplemental report whenever they suspect that bias or hate is present.
Building a robust case and collecting the right types of evidence and using that supplemental hate crime checklist to help you do that is really going to make a strong case so that we can hold these people accountable.
It'll strengthen their investigations. It'll help the victim explain what they mean when they say that they feel that they're being targeted.
It's like life doesn't stop, you know, there's no like bereavement for that type of situation. There's no, it's just, you have to deal with it. And then when you tell stories, you get, I didn't even know it was like that. I didn't even know things like that happen. And they do often.
It's not too late to do the right thing, especially when it comes to bias-motivated or hate crimes. If you have a case that you remember, going back and reclassifying it and reaching out to the victim and providing the resources that the state now has available for all victims of hate is a phone call and email away.
I was directly in contact with the detective. He was very nice, very understanding. He checked in with me and my family very often. They did their best to connect with us and to ensure our safety and our emotional recovery.
Officers have access to an important resource that can help communities that are targeted for hate. In California, we have California versus Hate, which is a resource line and network provided by the Civil Rights Department for the state of California. And it provides free resources to anyone who is targeted for a hate incident or a hate crime that is accessible to all Californians in over 200 languages. You never have to leave someone empty-handed if they have the courage to report an act of hate to you.
The state agencies, our advocacy partners, they can take the baton from us and move forward with helping the victims to recover from these awful instances.
After my incident happened, LA versus Hate connected me to counseling. If it wasn't for that, I don't know how I would have just internally got through the trauma that I experienced from my incident. I actually got in contact with the Civil Rights Department. I now have the honor of helping other victims of hate.
I think it's important to stand up to hate and to expose it for what it is, and the more we talk about it and encourage people to come forward, the more we can understand why this occurs and hopefully prevent it in the future.
Everyone has a responsibility to respond effectively and compassionately to hate crimes and hate incidences. And if law enforcement builds those relationships and builds trust and builds communication, I'm hoping that we can live in a society free of hate.
Thank you for presenting that video, Commissioner Damski.
Thank you, Chair. It's not clear to me at this point if we want to invite comments from the commissioners at this point in time or after I do my report.
Why don't you do your report and then we can see if there are questions about the report and then comments on the video.
Thank you, sir.
No, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dancy, if I wasn't clear. I think you should do your report and then we'll do, at the end of your report, we'll see if there are questions about your report and or questions. Oh, you mean if we want to wait until the subcommittee?
Yes.
Let's do, since we just watched the video, let's do comments on the video now and then, well, we'll get to your report in the subcommittee. I'm sorry, I was confused there for a minute.
That's okay. Thank you.
But are there comments on the video? I mean, I just want to say I actually emailed Commissioner Damski once I got to see the video and thanked Commissioner Damski for her leadership around it. And I know it wasn't everything that I think Commissioner Damski or others on the commission wanted, but it was great to see it. And it was a very well done, well produced, and I hope it has great impact in our state. Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank Commissioner Damski for her tenacity in completing this project. It was very challenging. I just want to go on the record that Chief McDonald, who's a new police chief for the Los Angeles Police Department has already mandated this film will be seen by all LAPD personnel. So I don't know if that's something we want to acknowledge, those agencies that have embraced this as a policy, but perhaps that would entice other agencies to do the same thing.
Thank you, Commissioner Suthers. And thank you for your influence on the LAPD Police Commission for helping that to occur. I'm sure you had something to do with that. Other comments on the video or questions? Commissioner Levin.
Yes, first of all, thank you for the incredible work you did, Commissioner Damsky. This is actually part of a multi-year effort. Last decade, Greg gave me a call and said, we've got this problem with reporting. We asked for an audit by the state auditor, and they looked at various police departments and found within that the supplemental form, which came out in the video, seemed to be attributed to the success that LA had in LAPD. In having these real substantive numbers as opposed to some neighboring agencies. So really just want to thank Commissioner Damsky for just her indefatigable work that got this video out there, because years ago there had to be an effort just to publicize the fact that these policies exist and that the supplemental form seemed to have had an effect. So this is just, again, teamwork which spanned over a span of years. And I think we all owe Commissioner Damsky just such a great of gratitude. And again, in echoing Chair Royball's comments, you know, when you hit a home run, it doesn't mean that that you didn't do a grand slam. It was a beautiful job, and I really want to commend you, and I want to commend the commission for showing the video, because one of the things that we're finding is many departments are really undereducated nationally and also within the state about what the requirements of the law is. So hats off. Thank you so much, Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Before we take public comment, I just want to say, I think in a previous commission meeting, I had said that a friend who I had not heard from in a long time and who now lives in Riverside County called me because they were a victim of a hate incident and were beaten up, and they did not necessarily have the best interaction with law enforcement in their community to report the incident, and so called me. I connected them with California versus Hate, and they were able to get the support and resources that they needed and eventually be able to file the report. So I'm hopeful that this video and the other work that California versus Hate is doing continues to have that impact, where people feel like they can be heard and can report these incidents when they occur. So again, thank you, Commissioner Damsky. I do not see any public comment, requests for verbal public comment. Monica, are there any email public comments?
No public comment via email.
Thank you, Monica. Shanna, are there any public comments in the office in Los Angeles?
No public comments.
All right, thank you. And we will come back to the subcommittee report when we get to chair and committee reports, which is next. So our next item is item number 7. Chair and subcommittee updates and discussion. A quick report for me today. I just want to take a moment to reflect on the many important events that have occurred since our last meeting. Last month, we recognized Sikh Awareness and Appreciation Month, Native American Heritage Month, and Transgender Day of Remembrance. Just as we look forward, we will be holding chair and vice chair elections at the January meeting, which will be at the end of January. And we're going to be talking in a little bit about some amendments to our policy around elections, which we'll get to in just a bit. That is all I have for today, except to wish all of you a very happy holiday season and a very happy new year, since we will not convene until the new year. And I continue to be excited to serve with all of you on behalf of the people of our great state. And thank you for your service to the commission. Let's move on to the subcommittee on data and research. And that report today is going to be given by Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Levin, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. I think the first thing that I'll address is the wonderful convening, and he's not here to take the credit for it. Dr. Kevin Thomas. And again, you know, how do I say this? When you have institutions or you have events, when you populate them with folks who are motivated and intellectually curious, you get these wonderful events. Back at the tail end of October, shortly before the election, a convening was held at UCLA with their ISH, Institute for the Study of Hate, and it was divided into two. One looked at K through 12, the other looked at online hate, and it consisted of a variety of stakeholders, practitioners, as well as subject matter experts. So there was really so much to cover there. But what I will say, what became apparent is that these measures in schools are very much needed. And we talked about some data on hate offenders, for instance, and what percentage in Arizona is the latest we got, showed 31% under 18. We also, so not only talked about that with practitioners and experts in the field, we also divided it with respect to online hate. And that was huge. We had participation from across the top echelon of the CRD. And we had researchers from USC, UCLA, and Stanford and elsewhere. And one thing that I think became apparent from this convening is that the level of hate that has been mainstreamed online has increased significantly at the very time that our tools to address it are being curtailed, including access to data from some of these social media companies. Moreover, it came out in the meeting, and this is why it's great to have these reestablished and new connections with the legislature, that a very watered down and diluted piece of legislation that was put through the legislature by Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, who's been doing some excellent work in the area of hate, that merely required large social media companies to say, what is your term of service and how did you enforce it? In other words, publicly disclosing that. The Ninth Circuit took the side of Elon Musk. So again, another example of where we're having headwinds that will come federally, because with regard to any kind of federal response to what is going on with respect to big tech, I would imagine would be very limited in this new administration. So some signs of hope with regard to the level of research and the conclusions with regard to how hate has been mainstreamed. It is no longer hanging out on the guardrails. And the policy initiatives needed, particularly at the state level, were things that were examined. And Dr. Kevin Thomas, Alec, Adam, and Kevin, the whole higher echelon of the CRD fully participated. It was a wonderful convening. So if I could just ask all my fellow commissioners to send good wishes to our ill colleague today, Dr. Kevin Thomas, who really should take a victory lap on the great job of not only organizing and dividing the type of subject matter that we looked at, but getting an array of expertise and stakeholders in on the same day. One other quick shout out to Stop API Hate. Annie Lee was wonderful. And we should give her our heartiest thanks as well. Anyway, thank you. We have other things going on with research. We have CHIS, which does these surveys, and we're going to be focusing on survivors of hate crimes and incidents with that. And there's also, as Alec alluded to a minute ago, some work that is being done on bystander education. So a real exciting time, but also a real important time, because again, the opportunities for legislatures, at least nationally, and agencies to examine these issues is going to be severely curtailed, making our work incredibly important. So I want to thank the CRD, I want to thank the commission for really backing this excellent research up. And what it shows is that the hate is getting more diversified, and there are more malefactors taking advantage of it at the very time when enforcement by trust and security teams at these large social media companies are being scaled down. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Let's move on to Subcommittee on Policy Recommendations and Best Practices in Other Jurisdictions. Commissioner Che.
Yes, thank you. As Deputy Director Watts had shared, in our subcommittee, we did talk at great length about the credible threats at the federal level, including the specific attacks against immigrants in our state. As many of you may know, close to 30% of our residents are foreign-born. And also it was discussed that we believe that TGI community members and those who are deemed to be a national security threat, specifically Chinese migrants, Muslims, may also be targeted. We were heartened to hear that the governor and AG Bonta has clearly laid out a legal strategy, but we know that that is just one piece of the puzzle. It's important to just know that California has done a lot in terms of infrastructure, and with the launch of California versus Hate, to be able to respond to requests for support. We think that this environment is going to embolden interpersonal and potentially institutional forms of bias and harm. And I think it's going to be really important that we are prepared and to use the commission and our platform to really encourage things like public messaging from our elected officials and leaders across the industry. And I think, as it was alluded before, the work of CRD and the commission to build trust in the community is even more vital, because we do believe that misinformation and the, again, credible threats by the incoming administration has created a lot of fear within our communities. And I think that there is a concern that rather than seeking support or assistance, that many members of our community will fear doing that, fear being entangled with government, regardless of our messaging that immigration status, et cetera, and other identities are not a factor in consideration. And then the final note is, and this is for the community forum subcommittee, is that we received positive feedback about the forums focused on people with disabilities and disability-based bias, discrimination, and hate. And we want to encourage the community forum committee to continue to do more with regard to our understanding, so that we can be responsive to this community as well. And that is the conclusion of my report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Che. We'll move on to the Subcommittee on Recommendations for Law Enforcement, today given by Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, one thing, Commissioner Damsky, that I wanted to say about the video that I
sir.
didn't get to say when we were talking about it was so lovely to see Becky Monroe.
Yes, I will be mentioning her in my report. So the Committee for Recommendations for Law Enforcement spent much of our first 2 years since we've been initiated working on this training video that we just viewed. Now that the project has been completed and since the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training has made it available publicly online, we are looking for ways to promote it and raise awareness about it. Specifically in communities of interest and in tandem with promoting the California versus Hate hotline online and phone hotline and the CRD Community Conflict Resolution Unit. CRD staff will be publicizing this training video early in 2025 with a press release and social media campaign. And I wanted to acknowledge the crucial help of CRD staff in moving this project along, including former Deputy Director Becky Monroe, who is featured in the video, and Rebecca Goodsell. We received a warm thank you letter from the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training for our participation in working with them to create the video. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to read it, but I will have staff share that with the rest of the Commission later. This morning, I learned that LA versus Hate, which California versus Hate is modeled after, has posted a video on its Facebook page about AB 449 and the importance of reporting hate crimes and incidents. Their video contains a link to their webpage for information about the AB 449 training for LA County law enforcement. I'm really excited to see this work moving forward in law enforcement communities, and I'm eager to look at the materials on their website and report on them in future meetings. As we look forward to beginning our 3rd year of work, projects this committee is exploring include learning from local organizations which are doing hate prevention work that we can support, uplift, and mirror, studying effective partnerships between tribal and municipal judicial systems where this occurs, talking with human relations commissions and councils to hear about hate issues brought to their attention and how they're working to resolve them, reaching out to community police oversight boards to learn how these organizations are addressing law enforcement response to hate crimes and incidents, looking for possible overlaps between where known hate groups are located and local law enforcement activity regarding hate crimes. An example we are considering is using the Southern Poverty Law Center hate map for this purpose. And looking at funding resources available for local law enforcement to address hate crimes, focusing on funding for training and sufficient personnel to investigate and do this reporting. We're having also discussions about the desire to expand our focus, as if we're not doing enough, to include other areas or perhaps rotate committee assignments. We are working to reorganize our committee's work to align with the 3 buckets of work performed by CRD staff, which are identifying patterns and trends through data research, prevention, looking at effective efforts for promoting welcome, safety, and reducing hate crimes and incidents, and response. Law enforcement is one facet of response, and response also includes policy recommendations, which may be made by any of our committees and referred to our policy committee. The Law Enforcement Committee is interested in looking at potential laws and, more importantly, enforcement of laws that exist. We saw the addressment of law enforcement issues and concerns in 2 community forums this year, one with the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians and the other with community organizations in Fresno. Our most recent pressing area of concern, as we've heard many times from other commissioners and staff today, is working on pushing back on policies from the incoming presidential administration, which will likely have adverse impacts on California residents. We know Governor Newsom is working with governors in other states to protect states from potential lawsuits, and California Attorney General Rob Bonta is posting information for protecting Californians from attacks on abortion and reproductive health care, marriages of same-sex couples, and immigrants from deportation challenges. We are hoping we can schedule AG Bonta to speak at one of our upcoming meetings about his work to protect Californians. Towards addressing concerns about California's immigrants and threats of deportation, we determined that CPB, Customs and Border Patrol, and ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, are federal agencies and therefore are not subject to the hate crime reporting requirements of AB 449, which is California state law and governs state law enforcement agencies only. We look forward to working with all members of this commission to protect California residents in any way we are able. And that concludes my report today.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Damsky. Let's move on to the subcommittee on community forums. Unfortunately, Commissioners Cuellar and Filer are not with us at this moment, so in their place is Deputy Director Watts. Alec.
Thank you, Chair Roybal. So I'd like to begin the Community Forum Subcommittee update with a recap of the Community Forum in Fresno, which, just as a reminder, was organized as a sort of listening session with community members, a very different model than what we've been using in the past. Dave was there, and I asked him to give us an update of the forum. So Dave Kalkstein, who, just as a reminder, is a research data specialist with the Commission, I will turn it over to you to give an update.
Yeah, so we had our joint forum. This was joint alongside in partnership with the Racial Equity Commission and the California Commission on Asian and Pacific Islander American Affairs. We held this in Fresno last week. It was at FIRM, which is the Fresno Interdenominational Refugee Ministries, which is an organization that does a lot of work in the community with various refugee communities. The format was different different community groups came in and sort of sat at tables of their communities. And we had listening sessions where commissioners from the various commissions went and sat with them, had a prepared list of questions, and the communities reported back, gave answers to those questions, and just had opportunities to talk and tell commissioners their concerns and things that they were experiencing. It was very well attended. There was about 60 people across the different groups. It was a full room. There was food there that was supplied, that was donated. Some of the groups that were in attendance were Oaxacans, Sikhs, refugees from Afghanistan, Cambodians, and also there was a decent Hmong community representation. Some of the things that we heard in these listening sessions is people talked about their experiences with racist and xenophobic harassment in public places, in their residence and in apartments that they were renting, and sort of communities. A lot of where these people lived were apartments that were specifically for refugees. So there's a lot of, for example, there's a big Hmong community that lives in the same apartment complex. A big theme that came up was poor language accessibility when attempting to access public services. And this was either unavailable translators for people who only speak certain languages, and also incomplete translations. People felt like that was a form of discrimination and bias that they experienced, is that they felt like what they were saying was not being translated properly, sometimes intentionally so. And that came up from multiple groups, that language access was something that they experienced, or limitations with that when accessing all sorts of services, healthcare services, but also government services and interacting with law enforcement. There were also issues raised about deportation concerns and concerns about what might happen in these communities and to these communities in the incoming administration. And there was also a lot of discussion about affordability concerns and changes in cost of living and housing affordability. Yeah, that's a high level overview of everything. It was really great event, really great participation, and I think it was cool to have multiple commissions there. I feel like people got a chance to talk about different things and a variety of things, and I think it was really appreciated by the communities that were there and the people who were there. I think the organization, having a forum, and just having it demonstrated that people from government, representing government, took the time to listen to these people and be invested in their communities. So I think it was an awesome success. And another one that was Kevin Thomas put that one, was largely in charge of putting that one on, also with Monica. They did a lot of great work, so I think it was a really good event.
Great, thank you, Dave. So looking forward to next year. Next year, just as a reminder, we organize 4 of these community forums each year, and so next year is a new year to organize another 4. We would like to use the time in this meeting to explore other topics we haven't explored yet in community forums and just get some feedback from you. I'm sure each of you might have some sort of top of mind topics, and this meeting is the time to, I guess, voice what you're thinking in terms of community forums for next year. Some things that have come up in the past for potential topics include a community forum where we highlight the findings from our report. So we've done a lot of great work doing a lot of research and developing policy recommendations. And as soon as our report from last year is out, we might want to organize a forum to publicize those findings. Another forum topic that's come up is online hate. This is obviously a very big topic, and we've done a little bit of research on it. We have a contract set up about it, but we haven't had a community forum around this topic. There's also, but I can't remember who mentioned this, but programs, I think maybe Shireen Sinar mentioned this, but we could also have a forum on sort of programs designed to bring communities together, sort of bridging divides and things like the Dialogue Across Difference initiative at UCLA. I think there's is a very important time to have those sorts of programs, and it might be good to sort of uplift them and learn more about them. Another approach for our forums too is to continue partnering with CBOs, as we did with this last one in Fresno, where we partner with a specific organization and work with them on turnout and organizing it to make sure it meets the needs of the community. So with that, I'll sort of open the floor to if anybody has any suggestions for future community forum topics.
Thank you, Alec. I would just say I think it's important to continue to be in the rural places in the state, or more rural and out of urban centers. I don't think that needs to be all the community forums, but I would hope that we would continue to place the forums in places where that often do not get the attention that they need or deserve. And being in Fresno, I think is important, being in other places that as Commissioner Levin reminds us often, that there are places who don't report hate incidents or hate crimes, and so is there a way to bring some awareness using the community forums as a way to do that? And then the other thing that I would just also want to encourage, not necessarily in a topic area, but that we could partner with CBOs to host the forums. Being at the Oakland Asian Cultural Center and talking about the disability justice work, I think was important to do some intersectional work around these matters in the state. So I would hope that we would continue to do that. And then the last thing I'll say is just as a topic is I think it would be great to do a community forum on trans and gender non-binary folks and the impacts of hate on those communities. Because not only are they subject to very violent attacks, but also there are familial relationships and the impacts of hate and violence on that community in particular, as we saw in the election, is really high. And so I want to make sure that we are addressing that in the state as well. Other ideas, Commissioner Levin?
I will leave out my suggestion of a forum on the transgender community because you did it so eloquently. So thank you. But I do, if I could just reiterate and co-support my dear chair. What's going on is wrong. And I don't say this from a political standpoint, but the idea of individual liberty, how it relates to who one is, the medical choices that they make, are uniquely personal and are part of our system of a pluralistic democracy. And this is under attack. So I think it would not only be useful to have a forum that focuses on the TGI community, but I would hope one of the things that I think that this commission does so beautifully is in an era of idiocracy, when national political candidates say students go to school and they come home a different gender, shows the level of ignorance that exists. So part of what I think we do is by getting members of a community out there and showing that they deserve the respect and embrace of the law and a dignified treatment in our state is very important. But I also would like to hear from medical professionals, because this comes down to also something that is a personal issue relating to medicine. And there have, as we've seen with regard to public health overall, there is so much misinformation. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to bring to bear not only the shining stars of our community who are transgender, but also expertise from people who may or may not be, but can heighten the level of intelligence on this issue. Number two, undocumented and homeless people. As we've heard, the ability of society to protect the most vulnerable residents among us is another key facet of a pluralistic, civilized democracy. So I would like to have something like that, because these are groups right now that will be facing the onslaught of federal intervention that targets these communities. So thank you for bringing it up. And I think it's so darn important that it's not just members of immediate immigrant communities or the transgender community that stands up for this. There are obviously certain details that come out with respect to how and when do we apply particular policies. But and I reach out to people across the state who may disagree with me on these issues. But if there's one thing that I think we can bring people together on, and I'm sorry, I remember as a young student being in school, and there was a child with brittle bones. And instead of protecting this child, a bunch of violent malefactors attacked him and broke his bones. We are now doing this to transgender students. Whatever eventual policy measures are approved by the Supreme Court or not, we can do our valuable mission by being allies and educators around folks who have vile disinformation being projected against them. And when we're hearing the unconstitutional goal on the first day of office of our new president to eliminate the constitutional requirement attendant to birthright citizenship, I think it's so important that we address these tough issues. One last thing, religion hate crimes have gone up, and with the conflicts that we're seeing around the world, religious and ethnic conflict is something that I think we also have a unique opportunity to address. We have experts that will now not have opportunities in DC, but will be able to highlight and promote their research here in California. So Chair Roybal, thank you. And it is fundamentally important that these voices of reason against this terrible aggression directed against children in schools, we have not only symbolic power of highlighting the wonderful folks who reside in our state from these communities, but we also have an obligation as allies to get not only representation from these communities, but of those who have specific expertise on it. So thank you. And I can tell you how effective that wonderful presentation was in Oakland. Those two folks who spoke were only given a minute or two when they went to the legislature. But at the hearing, they had the full opportunity to talk about the kinds of challenges and impacts that affect particularly vulnerable communities. So, Russell, God bless you. I'm taking you out to lunch soon. I'm always a little delayed, but it is critically important that people of goodwill stand up and say, we are going to be armed with the morality of respecting each other's dignity, irrespective of what that characteristic or background is, and educating people with respect to not only difference, and if that includes a medical condition, that's fine as well, but to highlight allyship and information. And that is something that I want this commission to think about with these community forums. How can we better publicize them? And also, how can we take the parts that come out from these experts and put it in a standalone, maybe in videos? Last thing, we don't have to stop at community forums, because if we could take 7 to 10 minutes, maybe at each of these meetings, and get someone who can provide some kind of immediate perspective. There are tons of medical professionals. There are a significant cadre of people from the transgender community. I don't have to address it. We have one of the stars here now. But it is critical that it not be on the shoulders of the community that's being victimized alone. And that's why I think these community forums not only provide this opportunity for information and understanding. Gordon Allport in his book premised that interactions with those who are different modulates prejudice. This is so important. So from the top of the Civil Rights Department, who works so hard to this, to the commissioners that are not here that do this, and to our chair, thank you.
Thank you.
It is
Thank
so
you,
important
Commissioner
that we
Levin.
do this.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Che, I saw you had your hand up, but you put it down. Did you have a?
Just out of interest of time, I will, allow others to speak. Thank you.
Okay, great. Commissioner Dansky.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I've been thinking about, and I don't know if there is a mechanism for this within our commission. Well, two things I'm thinking about. One is we've been having a lot of conversation today about what to do to prepare ourselves and protect our citizens from what may be coming from Washington. And if there's a way to do this, I would like to think about how we can be proactive about it rather than reactive. I know that our governor and our attorney general are very much having their finger on the pulse of how to do that. So maybe we can bring in a discussion about being proactive against hate in California. Second thing I want to call to everybody's attention is we need to be aware that we are on the front lines. You know, we are the kind of people that the haters are going to be looking for. Every one of us as commissioners are visible in the community. We're visible statewide. I want us to be clear-eyed about the fact that we may also be targets, and encourage our staff and our legislature to do whatever they can to protect us as we do the work of protecting all of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dansky. We'll move to public comment in just A second, the last thing I would just wanted to say, Deputy Director Watts, is if there's more ways that we can do what we did with the Racial Equity Commission or some of the other commissions and co-host events with the Civil Rights Council like we did in Oakland, I think that would be great for us to do things with other public bodies that are concerned about this work. We'll move to public comment. I see we have one public comment for verbal public comment. Greg, welcome back. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you once again. Deputy Director Watts, I had understood that there was going to be a second forum on disability, which was not my suggestion. I thought it was coming from someone in the commission. Did I misunderstand that? There's not going to be such a thing?
We're collecting topics now. I think that was one suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I see no more verbal public comment requests. Monica, are there any email public comment requests?
No public comment via email.
And Shanna, any comments in Los Angeles?
No public comments.
All right, thank you so much. Deputy Director Watts, I didn't mean to cut the report up, but did you have anything else, or is that it?
That's it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Let's move on to agenda item 8. We're in the home stretch, which is our commission meeting schedule and subcommittees. That attachment was sent out previous to the email. We'll also put it in the chat. It came from a discussion that I've had with the staff, and so I've worked with the staff on a proposal for the commission meeting schedule for next year. I received feedback that commissioners would like more opportunities for subcommittees to collaborate. As you know, subcommittees can only meet in a publicly noticed meeting together. Therefore, the staff and I put together a proposal for that to happen. I'll quickly kind of go over it. From January through May, we will have our usual commission meetings in advance of producing our annual report. After the May meeting, the full commission meeting will meet every other month in June, August, October, and when the full commission does not meet, we will schedule collaboration meetings to allow subcommittees to collaborate in a public meeting if needed. These meetings will provide space for subcommittees to collaborate and have more in-depth discussions. To request a collaboration meeting, subcommittees should contact staff as soon as possible, but no later than 20 days before the scheduled meeting, so it can be properly noticed. You'll see that also in the proposal at the end of the year, those meetings in November and December, typically as we are now, are scheduled closer to some major holidays. So we typically reschedule those 2 meetings. The other one that I just want to note for staff is I believe the September meeting is the last day of Rosh Hashanah. So we may have to likely move that meeting as well, but just a note about that. This does not require any action from the commission, but I think we did want to just get if folks have any feedback on that, or if folks agree that this is the way that we'll move forward, then we'll do that. Right now, you do have the last or the 4th Wednesday of every month held in your calendars. We're not proposing different days except for the times we have to move the meetings in regards to holidays. But if there's no strenuous objections, then this is the meeting schedule in order for us to move forward. Any questions, comments? Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, just a quick question. Can a single subcommittee put together a collaboration meeting, or does it have to have another commissioner from another subcommittee or another full subcommittee join to hold such a meeting?
No, a subcommittee I think is it can hold a meeting now and schedule the meeting whenever they see fit. What this enables us to do is to be able for subcommittees to meet together in a way that they can't now, because we don't have, we could do it now, but we'd have to go about scheduling that meeting, etc. This takes advantage of meetings that we have or spaces that we have reserved already for commissioners to be able to do collaboration. Because as you know, if there's more than 2 commissioners present, that meeting needs to be publicly noticed. So this helps solve some of that and provide some additional time for collaboration among subcommittees. Commissioner Damsky, did you have a question or?
You just answered my question. Thank you, sir.
Great. All right. So we, seeing that there are no objections, we will move forward with this schedule for next year. I think as we continue, it's been 2 years that the commission has been established. As we continue to learn things about the way that we are working and that things should be more efficient in terms of use of the commission's time and to not have to delay. I think some of the things that have happened is things happen in subcommittees that can't be talked about until the commission meeting. Then they have to, there's just like a lot of back and forth. And so hopefully this will provide some additional opportunities for work to happen that doesn't require a full commission meeting, but can subcommittees can work together and collaborate. Great. So thank you for that. I don't see any public comment, verbal public comment requests for this item. Monica, are there any email comments?
No comments in the email.
Thank you. And Shanna, are there any comments in LA?
No comments.
Great. Let's move on to our next item, which is item number 9, chair and vice chair election process. As a reminder, in our first meeting next year in January, we will elect the chair and vice chair of the commission for 2025. As a reminder, those terms are for 1 year. Ahead of the elections, we received feedback on our election process, and as a result, we have made some minor edits. You'll see it on the screen in front of you. First, we will allow for self-nomination. Our process did not allow that before. Second, given that the commission currently has 8 members, we revised the process in the event of a tie. If a tie occurs, we will have a second round of voting. Candidates may give a short statement before the second round. If the vote is still tied, the CRD director or their designee will break the tie. Previously, the process was a bit ambiguous about what to do in the event of a tie, including if we tie, no candidate receives more than 50% of the vote. Therefore, the director should break it, or should we have a second round of voting? So this just delineates that process a little bit more clear. And so those are the changes that we are proposing. Is there any discussion, questions from commissioners? And I will also entertain a motion to approve these changes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that, Chair.
I heard Commissioner Che make the motion. Who seconded it?
I did, Commissioner Damsky.
Commissioner Damsky, thank you. Moved by Commissioner Che, seconded by Commissioner Damsky. Discussion. See no discussion. We'll move to public comment. I don't see any verbal requests. Oh, I do see a request for public comment. Greg, you welcome back. You have 2 minutes.
I was very disappointed that there was no item on the agenda today, following up on the disability forum. I had suggested 2 items for consideration of making serious recommendations. One was to recommend a bill to require every local law enforcement agency to have a senior and disability coordinator to make sure that the legal process and legal requirements of the Senior and Disability Justice Act are carried out. The other was to ask the Little Hoover Commission to undertake a major look at the entire problem of discrimination and hate against people in the disability community to come up with a comprehensive approach. I met with the policy committee subcommittee to discuss that. If the commission is serious about trying to influence legislation in the coming year, the next meeting, January, is the time to do it. Today would have been the better time to do it, but it's not too late next January. So I would ask that the commission take a formal action now so that it doesn't get put off again, to place those 2 items for consideration as action items on the agenda for January, that which of course does not commit you to vote to passing them. It merely commits you to hearing them and considering them and hearing any public comment.
Thank you, Greg.
I'll just say this commission has been in existence for 2 years. I think it's time to get serious about some of these policy recommendations.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate your comment. That comment would have been more appropriate and for items not on the agenda, not to the item that we are discussing now. But thank you for that comment. Are there any other comments related to this particular item? Is there any public comments via email?
No public comment via email.
And are there any comments in Los Angeles?
No comment.
All right, thank you. We will move to a vote then on this amendment to the commission manual and policy on the election of the chair and the vice chair. Deputy Director Watts, will you call the roll?
Chair Roybal.
Aye.
Vice Chair Salcedo.
Aye.
Commissioner Che.
Aye.
Commissioner Cuellar. Commissioner Damsky.
Aye.
Commissioner Filer. Commissioner Levin.
Aye.
Commissioner Suthers.
Aye.
6 ayes.
Great. The the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. The next item on the agenda is commission member announcements. I will not call on each of you individually, but if you have an announcement, please raise your hand. Commissioner Vice Chair Salcedo.
Thank you so much. I would like to just remind us that tomorrow is Human Rights Day, and it's important that we uplift and highlight the rights of all people, but also understand that, you know, our governments continue to oppress, marginalize, and violate the rights of our people, particularly our governmental attacks on DJI individuals. And so I just wanted to, you know, just bring light to that and for us to be reminded that as we can see, some of our government officials are responsible for the hate that is created towards all of our communities. And so hopefully tomorrow we can uplift and celebrate and at least uphold, even if it's just for one day, the rights of all humans. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Salcedo. Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to announce that a report has been released by the Committee of 100 called the State of Chinese Americans Survey 2024. The Committee of 100 is a nonprofit membership organization of prominent Chinese Americans and researchers in Chicago. And their survey reveals that 2/3 of Chinese Americans state, well, 68% state that they face at least one form of discrimination in an average month, with a large percentage of the Chinese American community stating they continue to struggle with mental health. 43% of those surveyed say they felt depressed, and 61% say that language and rhetoric used by U.S. news media when reporting on U.S.-China relations negatively affects how strangers treat them. I will ask our staff to forward this material, this link to the rest of our commissioners, so you can read more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Damsky. I do not see any other commission member announcements. So let's move on to item number 11, public comment on items not on the agenda. I see we have one public or one request for verbal public comment. Greg, welcome back. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I apologize. I thought I was speaking under public comment earlier. I'll just add that I had hoped that Commissioner Cuellar would be here to make a motion to put this on the agenda for next time. But I see she just emailed me a few minutes ago. She's at the Tribal Nation Summit in Washington, and she encouraged me to go ahead and request that this be put on the agenda. So I would ask that you put it on the agenda for next month, so we have a month to prepare and it won't get put off again.
All right, thank you, Greg. Are there other public comments? No other public comments? Are there other public comments on via email?
No public comment via email.
Thank you, Monica. Are there any comments in Los Angeles, Shauna?
No comments.
Thank you, Shauna. So Greg, I will touch base with Commissioner Quare. Deputy Director Watson, I will touch base with Commissioner Quare to understand those agenda items, and then we'll get back to you right away about the scheduling of them. Are there other future agenda items from the commissioners? Great, thank you. So our last agenda item is adjournment. So I know we had a very lengthy and substantive commission meeting today. I thank all of you for your active participation and listening and comments. I thought today's meeting was great. Lots of very informative presentations. Commissioner Adamski, thank you so much for your invitation to Assemblymember Ward and to the staff for working with former Commissioner Sinar and Professor Shemtov for their presentation. It was a very rich conversation today. And thank you to everyone for attending and for all of the public that attended and your public comments. Your comments are very much appreciated and listened to. And again, I just want to extend to all of my fellow commissioners and to the public a very happy holiday season and a very happy new year. I will look forward to seeing all of you at our commission meeting at the end of January. Have a great rest of the day, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Chair.
So I see Commissioner Adamski made the motion, Commissioner Che seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned at 12:21 p.m. on Monday, December 9th, 2024. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.